Hello, I'm Sean, and this podcast broke the internet.
Hi, I'm Carter, and this week, Frank Langella and breakfast foods broke the internet. So, Sean, I sent you this link to a story in Fast Times, I think, about Adam Lisagor. And had you heard of him before I sent that to you?
I'd never heard of him, although I can't say I don't recognize him. Or the style of his videos, which is probably, by this point, ripped off all over the place.
Right, so he makes these videos that are called sandwich videos. I actually don't know did they get into that in that article? Why his company is called Sandwich Videos?
Yeah, he explained something about eating alone. It was kind of weird. I was like, okay.
Okay. He definitely has a style to him, like a quirky style. Something that I was thinking of is if you, Sean, made a video, but you didn't use your name, like your online internet name, Sean D. Martin, and
right.
And it wasn't necessarily something that you normally do, I still think I would know if you made it.
Right. I have there's some kind of thumbprint on it.
Right. You put like a creative stamp on your work, and Adam clearly does that. And people like vibed on it so much so that he was able to like make a livelihood out of it, and now apparently has dozens of people who work for him making all of these videos, which is pretty awesome.
Right.
And it just started out back in like 2009. He just saw like a cool thing that a friend made, and he's like, I'd love to make a video about that thing you made and share it with people. And now he does that professionally in like marketing. But it's not really marketing.
That's ridiculous. Like that is the basic concept of what Five Things was.
Isn't it, right?
Right. It was like, hey, this is a thing that's cool, and I just want to share it so that everyone can know what it is.
Yeah, but it was a little more than that, right? Because you could have just like tweeted, hey, go watch this. Or you could have like sent smoke signals, but you wanted to also,
I wanted that visual component to put my voice over it somehow and explain it in the way that I wanted it explained.
Yeah, and I think that clearly a lot of people really liked that. And there was this, there was this synergy, this sort of like, you were able to share things with people, but also, explore your own creativity, and other people were able to, consume not only the content that you were sharing, but the way that you were sharing it. I think that if you were like, sharing the same things that were on Five Things, but, as an art installation, it probably would have been somewhat less successful.
Yeah, well, probably.
Or wildly successful. I don't know. You could have been in MoMA.
I missed a golden opportunity.
Shucks.
For my art installation.
We should see if anyone is doing like art installations that are about sharing timely things with people. I'm sure that someone, if they haven't done that, within the next 5 years, someone will do that.
Could we make money off of this? Should we not be talking about this?
I mean, that sounds like a terrible idea.
Don't do that.
So the whole thing about Adam's videos is that they're awesome videos that you like to watch. And one of my all-time favorites, which apparently is also like Sean's right now, is the AeroPress video. What do you think it is about it that's just so compelling?
It documents the entire process of everything he's doing in a way that I understood it through the very first time. I just watched it for the very first time. I don't even drink coffee, so seeing this process of making a cup of coffee would never have made any sense to me unless it was presented that way. It was like, these are all the steps in 3 to 5 second clips to understand how to make a cup of coffee with this AeroPress device.
Right, and it's not like making a cup of coffee, like, you pour the water into the thing, you put the beans in the hopper, and then you press the button, and then
you
coffee
go
comes out.
Take a shower.
Right, it's it's complicated. There are many steps. I think one of the reasons why. So this is how I make my coffee. If I'm making like a nice cup of coffee for myself, I use an AeroPress. And one of the things that I really liked about how he made the videos, or how he made that particular video, is something about the shot and how he lingered on certain things. It just showed that he did it very lovingly.
Yeah, it made me laugh at one point when he ejects the thing into the trash.
Mm-hmm.
He shot it from a much further angle than most of the things, and you get that nice satisfying like poop, and then the bam as it hits the trash can, like a cowboy spitting in a spittoon or something.
That is a great analogy. Yeah, exactly. And it just has that satisfying pop. And then the whole video, it's only about a minute long. The whole video is just the ambient noise of him making the coffee. He sits down, he drinks it, he lets out this sort of very aggressive sigh,
Right.
and then it cuts to like the porn music at the end. And it was basically like AeroPress porn.
Hot coffee.
Hot coffee. I was recently listening to a podcast, that the talk show with John Gruber and Merlin Mann, and they were talking about Adam Lisagor and how, you know, he's been pretty well known in the kind of like Mac nerd culture for a while, and now he's sort of like a big internet nerd. And they were reflecting on how it doesn't even really matter to some degree what he's making a video about anymore. The fact that he's making that video is compelling enough reason for them to check out what he's talking about. His act of creating a video is better marketing than the actual, you know, production that he puts into it, because you know that he's going to put so much time and effort and care into the videos that he makes. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then it just so happened that I went to the Sandwich Video website and I saw
he
had a new video up for this app called Breaking News. Did you see this video?
Yeah, I watched it. It feels I want to say David Lynchian.
Exactly. It's this awesome video. I don't know how they actually, someone who's very talented in like After Effects or I don't know what, you know, took the video that they made and made it look like it was on a TV screen with the corners rounded.
Yeah.
So that stuff on it actually appears rounded, which I thought was really cool. As the video was playing, I got my iPhone out. I downloaded the app.
I did too. I was so convinced by it. I was like, is this, because I thought it said iTunes, and I was like, is this on Android? I have to go find out right now. And it is. So I downloaded it.
I like it so far. I don't know if I'll keep using it, but it was enough for me to be like, yeah, I should try this.
Yeah, it evoked the feeling of I'm mad as hell. Network,
yeah.
That's for some reason he was smoking the cigarette and his hair, and yeah.
Patty Chayefsky, yeah. Yeah, it does have that feel to it, or that you know, kind of a good night and good luck, maybe.
Yeah.
Old timey, like smoking too.
It was a bold decision to let that actor smoke for that ad.
It was a bold move. I will say that another app that I can't use, but I've seen used before, that he made a video for, is called Oh Noes. I can't think of what it's called. It is this
Network.
app that. No, it's this app that you put on it only works on iPhones and Macs. It's this app that you put on your phone, and you can knock your phone and it unlocks your computer.
Okay.
You literally and if you heard that,
that's fun.
And then it unlocks your computer. Yeah. Highly disappointing though, right? Like, it's such a great idea, but then you think about it and you try it and you're like, oh, well, no. But thanks for trying. I mean, and the video was really good. The video was actually better than the product. I think that says something about Adam Lisagor.
Yeah. So the idea of sharing something that you like and going about it in this highly produced way is maybe what we're trying to capture here.
Maybe.
Before we break the internet.
Before we break the internet. Or is it after we break the internet?
I don't know. Maybe it's at the end of each episode.
Yeah, I mean...
It all comes to a screeching halt.
Maybe. It's like, well, yeah, because there's different ways to think about it, right? Like, maybe we broke the internet and now we're putting it back together. Yeah. Or maybe we're in the process of breaking the internet right now.
It's a philosophical discussion.
It's a discussion for another time. So why don't you tell us a little bit about something you want to share this week?
This week, I want to share a film that came out over a year ago it was one of those movies that I saw covered in a magazine, maybe on the internet somewhere, and I was like, oh, I'd love to see that film sometime. And then it just popped out of my mind for over a year, and then it was on my Netflix queue, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to watch that movie sometime, and then I just ignored it for months. And finally last night, because someone at work said to me, you have Netflix, right? And I said, yes. They said, have you watched Robot and Frank? And I said, no, it's in my queue. And they were like, It's a really good movie. You should watch it. So I popped up my Netflix queue, not intending to watch it, and there it was on my queue, and I was like, I should watch Robot and Frank tonight. And I got to like 90 minutes. Actually, it's probably a 90-minute long movie. I got to like 75 minutes, and I texted Carter and was like, have you watched Robot and Frank? And it was just a great, great little movie starring Frank Langella as Frank and some tiny dancer woman as Robot.
Some tiny dancer woman as Robot.
Yeah,
voiced by
I
Peter
had
Sarsgaard.
to, right, Peter Skarsgård, the Swede, right?
Yeah, the dreamy Swede.
That's what they called him on his basketball team.
Sean, I don't know if you can remember this, but maybe you will because you're a bit of a dork like me. Do you remember what Netflix thought you would rate Robot and Frank? Or is it possible for you to look it up?
It is possible.
So its average rating on Netflix is 3.6. And I rated mine 5 stars, which means I can't go back and look, I don't think, what Netflix thinks that I would rate it. Maybe you can, but I'm not going to try. But I remember that it thought I would give it a 4.7, and I cannot remember another movie that had such a wide differential between the average star rating and what Netflix thought I would rate it.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. I mean, so that's like 1.1 stars difference. That's what? That's 1.3. That's like 103%. 130% difference.
Mine isn't that big. It says you said the average is 3.6.
Yeah.
Mine is 4.4. Best
it says,
guess.
Oh yeah. Mine said it would be 4.7.
Okay.
But still, that's a pretty wide differential. Usually, it sits pretty close, and you're up or you're down.
Are you more
average.
apt to use 5 stars?
Probably. I would say that if I like.
I think
movie,
I give out 5 stars less frequently. Maybe.
Yeah, I give 5 stars to indicate that I liked it. I use Netflix the way that Netflix thinks most people use it, which is.
Am I doing it wrong?
No. It's sort of like the old YouTube star system where everybody gives a 5 or a 1.
Right.
And then a 3 if you were sort of like, nah, okay.
Man, I think my 5 star is when I think to myself, like, I'm going to watch this again soon. Like, this is a movie that I could watch at any point. 4 star is like, this was a great movie. Like, maybe I'm not going to watch this again, but now I've watched it and I thought it was great.
Maybe I have no system. Well, but no, clearly, no, I can't say that. I mean, I might have no system, but Netflix has clearly discovered it because it knew that I would give it more than 4.
Right.
Well, more than 4, right? 4.7, that's pretty close to 5. So, yeah, I don't know how I guess that I have no rhyme or reason to it, but Netflix seems to have figured it out, so.
I know one of the reasons it recommended it for me was because I gave 5 stars to Safety Not Guaranteed, which is a similar in tone kind of feeling, and also a, like, slightly off-kilter science fiction feel.
Yeah, okay. And there it is, Safety Not Guaranteed. I just scrolled down to the bottom of mine, and related videos is Safety Not Guaranteed. And lordy, look at that. It thinks I will give it 4.4 stars.
It's a good... You haven't seen it?
No.
It's a good movie.
I like Aubrey Plaza, so... She has just the right outlook on the world to mine. We have very similar outlooks on the world.
Also, she keeps getting more attractive, I think is what you're trying to say.
Yep, we have very similar worldviews.
So, Robot and Frank, my only impression of the film was pretty much the movie poster. There was a robot and there was Frank, and I didn't exactly know the details of what the movie was about. And it's clearly, now that I'm on this side of it, it's clearly about aging, and it has a science fiction spin on it, but it's kind of like the Isaac Asimov Android short stories. Like, they're about humans, even though there are Android characters in them. Those are just tools that he uses to give you a story about human behavior and the human experience.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Speaking of the poster, the whatever you want to call it for movies that aren't real anymore, and we only see them on the internet.
Right.
Do you ever look at a title and a poster and then you just like think the movie in your head, and you like make your own movie? or like, I think that this is what the movie is going to be about.
I
Because
think so, because I would have, if someone had asked me to speculate about what Robot and Frank were about, I would have had something to tell them. I wish I could know now what it was, because now it's too late. I've already watched it. But there was probably something in my head that I was like, it's this, and then this happens, and then this happens. And I would have been completely wrong.
Yeah, so first of all, I did not. So I saw the little picture of it really small, and I didn't realize that it was Frank Langella. I thought it was Alan Arkin.
Okay.
And because of the background being all like light and yellow, the thing in my head was like, oh, it's gonna be like the grandpa from Little Miss Sunshine, and he's got a pet robot.
Yeah.
Right, and it's gonna be like a cranky old grandpa and his like prankstery robot friend.
Hold on, I want to see this movie.
So maybe that's a great idea for a movie, and I'll put that in.
Someone greenlight that.
So that's going in the folder with the art installation content aware program. Okay. Yeah, exactly. I had no idea what to expect when I got into this movie, and I was planning on not really doing anything last night except reading, and then I got this text from Sean, like, have you seen this movie? And the same thing happened to me. I'm like, I've seen this in my Netflix queue, and I'm like, oh, it's that Alan Arkin movie with the quirky robot. Oh, I'll watch that someday, maybe. But, you know, you alerting me to it was enough to make me be like, oh, okay, I'll watch this. It's only an hour and a half long. It was not at all what I was expecting it to be, and I was surprisingly touched by the entire experience.
Yeah, definitely. I had similar feelings about, there's a point where the android is disabled, and I started having like panic attacks flashing back to Wall-E when he can't wake up Eve. I was like, he needs the robot. It's his friend.
Yeah, I thought that also the movie was brave in the way that it dealt with the robot in a way that, say, AI was not brave.
Okay.
In that the robot makes very clear that it isn't like becoming a human.
Yes.
Right.
There's a point where it tries to fool the old man, and I think he does to some degree fool the old man, and then later it's revealed like, no, I know that I'm just a robot.
Right, and throughout the movie, the robot is incredibly clear, like that it's not a person; it's there as a tool to help Frank, which, you know, in a thematic and a story way, it does. But the filmmakers and the story doesn't, like, you know, it doesn't cheap out and let us, you know, really firmly think that it's like a real person. It's not a Pinocchio.
No,
story.
It's an iPad with legs that can garden and cook lasagna.
Exactly, and it's really what happens to Frank because of the robot. That
right.
You know, and I think that for such a saccharine story, and really this is a very saccharine story. Like, it is a, you know, you are a cold, heartless bastard if you don't come out of this movie feeling like, oh, that was a great movie, and I feel good about things, and wasn't that sweet, but it didn't feel the need to go so far and over, you know, and turn the cornball up to 11, I guess. They didn't feel the need for that, and it wasn't necessary.
And they didn't feel the need to overdo the science fiction aspect of it either.
No, although I will say that I was really perturbed by some of the technology in their vision of the future, like the cell phones and the tablets. They're see-through.
Why do they always make see-through devices?
Who would use a see-through device?
No one is ever going to use a see-through. The other thing that bugs me a lot is display screens in the future don't seem to have edges. And actually, I didn't see that in Robot and Frank, but I saw it in Catching Fire. Screens don't have edges anymore. They just like fade off into the... And I was like, when will we not have a bold rectangular design on every screen? It will always look like that.
And I will say this. I could totally see a product that is see-through when you want it to be see-through, right?
Right.
Like, if you know those apps that use your camera to do like augmented reality, and then they show you like, here's the street you're on. If you hold the camera up, I'll show you the street. And now I've got like...
That would be cool.
That would be cool if you didn't have to use the camera. But like, even if you're trying to make a phone call and you're in a library and there's text on your phone and then there's all this stuff around you, wouldn't you be like, I can't find anything?
You have to like hold it up to a window or something.
There would be a whole new like architectural and like home decorating movement of like making solid blocks of dark color so that you could hold your phones and your tablets up to them. Right, and like I think there would be a proliferation of like tiled floors with big blocks of like dark color so you could see things. It makes no sense to me. Not that I would ever over nitpick a movie.
we don't do that.
We don't do that. You know what else I
never
really
have.
You know what else I really didn't like, and I see this a lot in sort of imagined futures, is like the cars all get skinny.
Right.
Did you notice there were a couple real thin cars?
Because throwing the center of balance off on a vehicle is what's going to help vehicular safety in the future.
Although they might be onto something there. Having moved back to Washington, when I lived out here a long time ago, we had zip cars. Do you know about zip cars?
Yeah.
Okay, so they still have those, but now they have a new thing called Car to Go, which wasn't here before, and I'd never heard of it. Car to Go is like zip car, but the cars are itty bitty, teensy weeny, yellow polka dot bikini cars.
Death machines?
Death traps that my mother would never let me drive in. They are really, really short and thin, and I really thought when I first saw one that there was only one seat, but you can fit two people in, just not very comfortably. I thought it was like a one seat, like almost like
sit between someone's legs.
Yeah, I thought that it was a car that only had one seat and just a shell around it. Like they turned like a moped into a car or something, just putting a shell around it. So maybe that's where we're going. I don't know.
The smartphones and tablets in the film, by the way, were designed by Justin Ouellette of Tumblr.
Huh.
So you can blame him for making them clear, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing to like.
It always looks cool in the movies, but ever since Minority Report, it's been the internet's bane. Like, this is never going to happen.
Right. I blame Minority Report as well for like that idea of like touching things directly. No one would want to do what Tom Cruise was doing.
Putting on the special glove and manipulating everything midair.
There are
like
stories
like a sorcerer.
Right. There are stories right from the set of how he had to take breaks between filming that because his arms got too tired. Right. And it's true. Like, if you had to hold your arms up all the time to manipulate whatever, you would be like, why can't I have a keyboard and a mouse?
Right. And a desk to sit at like a normal person.
Right. There was also like one thing about this film that I didn't quite understand. Was this just me, or did it seem like the law enforcement system in the future is different from the law enforcement system of now?
Well,
in that like the sheriff and some random person can just like come into your house and be like, hey, we're in your house now.
It seemed like it was heightened drama for the sake of the film. I think it could also be argued that this is like a small town with like a small town sheriff. That's what he wasn't even in a uniform.
Right.
He just like showed up and was like, hi, I'm the sheriff.
Right. Well, but then afterwards, the asshole neighbor was like staking out Frank's house in a van with a police car there, and they were just like, whenever we see someone leave with something, we're gonna arrest them.
It was a corrupt small town. I'm not I don't know.
Maybe. That makes me think of a Simpsons episode when Homer becomes a union rep, and the union guys are like trying to convince him to become the dude, and he's they're like, well, there's no money in it. He goes, aw, unless you're crooked. Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Seems like a pretty crooked town. I really liked at the end how they kind of documented the state of robots now, like the Asimo over the credits.
Yeah, they showed all of the. There's a big movement in Japan already for this kind of robot, where
there are lots of old people and no young
people. Right. Robot as healthcare or as like home assistant.
Well, would you recommend Robot and Frank to? Well, would you recommend it to our nerd friends?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anyone who's read like a short Asimov story like I, Robot or something of that ilk. This is the same type of feeling and a very well acted film. I didn't even know Susan Sarandon was in it until I watched it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Oh, well, okay, I'll bring this up in just a second. Would you recommend it to just like anybody though?
My parents would probably be the outliers because they're I call them normal movie going people, but I think they would like this. But generally, I don't know. Probably not enough action for most people. It's an old man talking to a robot for 90 minutes.
Right. Well, they've got some heists and stuff going on,
right?
But they're not really exciting. Yeah, I think the same thing. I use my mom kind of as that bar, and I think that I probably wouldn't recommend this to her. But it also might be a movie where, you know, when I'm home at Christmas and we're just sort of around, I like maybe I'll just put it on and see if she like latches on.
Yeah, totally.
And if she does, I know she'll like it. But if she doesn't, I'll be like, oh, I pushed the wrong button. Let's watch something else.
I meant to turn on The Walking Dead.
I meant to turn something else on. The thing I was going to bring up, did I just make this up? Oh, so Liv Tyler is Frank's daughter, and throughout most of the film, she is in Kashmir, right?
I don't remember where she. At some point, she was in Turkmenistan. I remember her saying. I don't remember which place was where.
I think at some point she was in Kashmir, and maybe I'm totally making this up, but on the Wikipedia page, I noticed that this film tied with a movie that was made in Kashmir, so unrelated to the movie at all. So I'll go back and see if she was actually in Kashmir, or maybe it was like Kyrgyzstan, and I just forgot. Okay.
Seems like an important fact to note.
Yeah, but research is for the weak. So, Sean, do you like breakfast?
Only every day. No, that's not true. I work way too early to eat breakfast sometimes.
Really? What?
Every time that I'm here in the morning, every time I will make myself breakfast.
If you don't make breakfast, what do you do? Do you try to catch
I take a banana and a peanut bar, like a granola bar, to work, and I eat it as I'm starting my day.
If I can't do breakfast, I have two options. I have a cafeteria at my place that's pretty cheap, but normally what I do is I will get a yogurt, like a banana yogurt or a strawberry yogurt or something, and that's enough for me. But I like breakfast.
I love breakfast.
There's nothing better for me than having like some runny eggs over toast with bacon and orange juice and coffee, and just I love breakfast.
I've put a refocus on juice in my life since I mostly stopped drinking soda, and it's great.
Juice is wonderful. I like fresh squeezed juice. I have a juicer at my mom's house where we make like all sorts of kinds of fun, crazy juices. But anyway, I would say that a staple of not only breakfast but of all cooking is the egg.
The incredible indelible spectacle. I don't know.
It is a pretty wonderful thing, right? So if you want to start cooking and you are starting from zero, I think one of the best places to start is like learning how to cook an egg, right?
Yeah, I think the very first thing I ever learned to cook on the stovetop was an egg.
I learned how to make scrambled eggs.
Thanks, Dad.
Thanks, Mom. One of the first things I ever learned to make was scrambled eggs, and I'm no cook of any great measure, but I can cook a lot of things, and I know a lot about cooking, and I enjoy cooking, and I know a lot of different ways to cook eggs, right? I think everyone knows, oh wow, how can you cook an egg? There's lots of ways to cook eggs.
I like to do that way where like at a hibachi, they spin it and then they slice it with the spatula and then they pull the egg out.
Oh yeah. I recently found, or I can't do it, but if you...
I can't do it either.
Slow poach an egg. There are two reasons why I can't do this. One, because I can't slow poach an egg. Slow poaching an egg is where you poach an egg in the shell in a water bath.
Okay.
And then you get a poached egg, but you did it in the shell. uh, if you take a slow poached egg and you take like a fork or something and you poke a hole in the top and the bottom and you just blow, it comes out.
Oh, right, right. I think I
Yeah,
learned that from like Bill Nye or something.
yeah. I tried it and it broke and
You
I
got
can't.
egg on your face?
Oh, now I feel like we can't even continue
It was
because
right
that
there.
was
Sorry.
you went out on you like yeah.
You should have saved that in the barrel.
Yeah, you gotta run those by me before we start recording, so I know when to like let you know to trigger those. Anyway, uh, there are dozens of ways to cook an egg, and I've done many of them. And while I'm sure there are really crazy ways to cook an egg, right? Like you fry it in, boiling hot lava for 2 seconds and then throw it at the wall and then take a gun and shoot it full of pellets of salt and pepper or something. Like, those are crazy. I thought I knew every really normal way to cook an egg to eat every day. You can scramble an egg, you can fry an egg, you can poach an egg. Those are like the ways that I know to cook an egg.
Right.
And I sort of lived in this world for a while where I thought I know every way there is to cook an egg. And then I was watching a show on PBS. It's The Mind of a Chef with David Chang. David Chang is a noted New York restaurateur. He has opened a series of restaurants. It's Korean fusion restaurants, Momofuku, and he decided to pair up with Anthony Bourdain, which was a brilliant idea because Anthony Bourdain is a genius.
Yeah, I love that guy.
And they made this they did this 13 episode run of shows on PBS, which is also available on Netflix, called The Mind of a Chef, where David Chang talks with a whole bunch of chefs in the United States and around the world about like various things. And one of them was an episode all about eggs. And he showed a way to cook an egg that you can do in your house right now that I'd never seen before. And it was like I felt this childlike, wonder of like, oh my God.
You've unlocked the secret.
Well, just like there are new ways to cook eggs. Like maybe there are new ways to do anything.
There's new ways to breathe.
Right? Like, it's what other things in my life have I left unexamined? That maybe there's new ways to cook toast. Maybe there's new ways to like write a story. I don't know. But anyway, I wanted to share with you this way to cook an egg. You can try it. So, I've heard it called two things: a poached scrambled egg, or a whirlpool egg. So what you do is, if you've ever poached an egg before, you know that you just take boiling water and maybe a little bit of white vinegar, and you put, you crack an egg and you put it right in to the boiling water. And some people use those little poaching cups, but I think or a ramekin or something. I think that's a waste of time. It'll be fine. And then it cooks there for 45 seconds, and then you take like a slotted spoon or whatever, and then you put the egg in cold water, and then you can serve it on like Eggs Benedict or whatever, right? Poached egg.
Right.
Scrambled egg, also real simple. You take an egg or however many you want, you take a fork or whatever, and you break it all up in a cup or whatever, and then you put it into a pan with some fat of some sort, butter, Pam, olive oil, whatever you want, and then after a minute or two, it becomes all fluffy, delicious scrambled egg.
Correct.
This method combines those two into one. So what you do is you bring about 4 inches of water in a pot to about 70 degrees Celsius. It's like right before it starts bubbling.
Okay.
Okay. And then you take an egg or two or three, and you take a fork, break them all up like you're going to make scrambled eggs.
Right.
Then you take your fork, and you put it in the water, and you spin it clockwise real fast till you have a whirlpool.
Without burning yourself, kids.
Yeah, don't burn yourself. So you have a whirlpool, and then you take your eggs, and you put as you're spinning the water, you pour the eggs into that, and then you put the top on that pot, and you let it sit there for 20 seconds. And then you take that, and you pour all the water off, and then you pour the eggs off into either a sieve or like a slotted spoon or whatever, and then you let the water run off, and the eggs are done. 20 seconds.
And delicious, I'm assuming.
It's really interesting. So you didn't fry them, right?
Right.
I think that one of those like strong flavors you get with scrambled eggs is butter, if it's, you know, or fat.
If you're doing it right.
Right. It's like, ooh, delicious butter.
I love some eggs with my butter in the morning.
Delicious. You get, you know, but you're frying them in fat, so you get that taste of fat. This method for cooking an egg, it makes it's lighter than you can possibly get a scrambled egg. It's you know, some people pour like a little bit of water or milk or something in eggs when they scramble them.
Yeah, I've done milk.
This comes out kind of like that, but you don't have to put water and milk in it or anything, because you're scrambling, like, it scrambles incredibly quickly because it's got the water all over it. It's like these little ribbons of the egg in the water are cooking very rapidly, so it's very light and very like fluffy. It's it's like the same consistency as an omelet that is runny on the inside. Okay. But there's no runny in the egg at all.
Right.
And then the way that I eat it is you put like a little pat of butter on it because you need butter.
As previously discussed.
Or olive oil or whatever. And then a little salt, a little pepper. And then I put some hot sauce on it because I put hot sauce on everything. But,
okay.
You don't have to do that. And that
is that because you lived in the South for a time?
Yeah, and they ruined me. But that is how you make a poached scrambled egg or whirlpool egg. I just thought I would share that.
Nobody's going to look at you after you say whirlpool egg like you're a normal person.
Like it's a brand or something, like a Whirlpool washer dryer.
Right.
Right? Like it's like, man, American business, like, and industry have just gone, you know, they're all gone now. They're just making eggs.
I think we just made an expression.
Whirlpool, yep.
Put it on Urban Dictionary.
Whirlpool eggs.
Adam Lisagor.
Adam Lisagor. You know what? Now I'm starting to doubt that that's how you pronounce his name. But how else would you pronounce it?
I guess I was pronouncing it with the accent on the last syllable. I was saying it Lisagor. At least now I can't do it. Lisagor.
Lisagor. Like Lisa Gore. Like if Lisa from The Simpsons married Al Gore.
Right. Or if Al Gore just had a daughter named Lisa. I think.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, Sean, but who would think that? Is my example clearly more obvious?
Of course, I would go to the fictional example of the cartoon character Lisa first.
Other than your, like, convoluted Al Gore had a daughter and named her a name. Please. Well, I'm Carter, and this podcast broke the internet.
I'm Sean, and this week, unconventional gaming broke the internet. Oscar season is upon us. What movies have you been seeing this year, 2014, Carter?
Well, I've actually seen quite a few movies this year already. So it is only the 18th, so it's I've only had 18 days in the year to see any movies, and I still have today to see movies, but I've seen 3. I saw, in order of seeing them, the new Paranormal Activity movie, which when I texted Sean about, he legitimately didn't know there was a new.
I knew nothing about a Paranormal Activity movie.
Oh, there was one.
I feel like a bad fan because I always say good things about that series, no matter what the detractors say.
We may have an offline conversation about it once you've had a chance to see it, because I have a lot of conflicted feelings about it.
Okay.
Which are okay. Spike Jonze, Her,
yes,
which has been getting a lot of buzz, and Oscar, what have you, and Wolf of Wall Street, also Oscar, blah blah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Leo,
and others, and a lot of cocaine.
A lot of Quaaludes.
Yeah, Quaaludes, man.
Which I knew nothing about before. Basically, everything I know about Quaaludes, I learned from that film.
Quaaludes was my go-to drug to talk about, like, things from a long time ago.
Right.
As a joke, like, someone is talking about something from, like, the 60s or 70s. I'm like, what, were you on Quaaludes? Right. Because, and I didn't know, but I learned from the movie, they haven't made Quaaludes since like 1989.
Right. They were Schedule 1 by the United States government, so you can't really get them now. They're gone.
They're gone now. So if you go and see Wolf of Wall Street and you're sort of put off by all the cocaine and you're thinking about Quaaludes, you're probably out of luck.
Right.
Unless you have the Jonah Hill hookup. So what have you seen this year?
I have seen, in my order, Anchorman 2, then American Hustle, then Wolf of Wall Street.
So you have also seen three films this year.
Yes.
I would think that three movies in 3 weeks is pretty aggressive, a lot for to see in theaters.
But I mean, it's winter, it's cold. I feel like now, and it's coming up on Oscar season, now is pretty much the time that I spend a lot of time at the movies every year.
I would agree with that, and I think that like the Oscar situation is something that drives a lot of people to the theaters. You know, that's obviously why Wolf of Wall Street and American Hustle got released so late in the year, and why lots of movies that are vying for the Oscars get released so late in the year. But I have a slightly different reason why I saw so many movies, and I'm seeing so many movies.
You won the lottery.
I won the lottery, and I'm not working anymore, and I'm just seeing movies all the time. I bought a movie theater, Sean.
Sweet.
If you want to come down, you can come see. We can put whatever we want up on the movies.
You need someone to run it? I'll do it.
Yeah, man. We could just like a whole situation. Maybe we can get like bootleg original, like the Laserdisc cuts of Star Wars, and put those up or something, so people can see the original ones with none of the crappy additions, like on a big screen, which no one will ever be able to do ever again.
No one will be able to. There is a local theater owner who does show like awesome movies from the 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever, and he's been trying to show Star Wars ever since he opened like 5 years ago, and now that it's owned by Disney, it's worse than ever to try and get the rights to screen it.
I would bet that no one will ever be able to get to do it ever. But
it's a shame.
It is a shame. It's a huge part of culture, which is like locked up. Well, I'm seeing a lot of movies because I've decided to see a lot of movies in the theater in 2014. And every time I say that to people, they ask the question, "Oh, did you make a New Year's resolution to see movies in 2014?" And I say, no. I did not make a New Year's resolution to see a lot of movies in 2014. I just am seeing a lot of movies in 2014 because, and I know myself, if I think of it as a New Year's resolution, I won't do it.
Right.
Like Sean, how
you don't want the stigma of the New Year's resolution.
Right. There's that, and just the whole social aspect of it, of like, oh, it's this thing that you do and blah blah blah, and it's just like the way that you get on the path is by getting on the path. You're either watching movies in 2014 or you're not watching movies in 2014. And I'm like, I'm just not even going to, like, no, it has nothing to do with New Year's resolution. It was a convenient time of year for me to decide this, because I was looking back on my 2013 and I was like, oh, I didn't have to work as hard in 2013 as I have in past years, because my job has been like lower intensity and I wasn't moving so much. And then I was like, well, how many movies did I see in the theater? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, maybe like 6. I'm like, ooh, that's not good. So I'm seeing a lot of movies in 2014. So and it has nothing to do with resolutions on New Year's.
It's a resolution, a personal resolution to yourself. It has nothing to do with that tradition.
Yeah, and it's just I'm doing it.
Right.
There's a difference between saying you're going to do something and doing something, because I am doing it. I've already seen 3 and I'm seeing more. So, and it gives me but here's my like total out, is that if I stop seeing movies in 2014, I'm like, well, I didn't resolve anything. So I didn't make a binding commitment. It's just like I decided I was going to do it. And if I don't do it, I'll do other things.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Quinn and I, when we were walking into Wolf of Wall Street, she was like, I want to see a lot of movies this year. And I was like, well, we better see as many movies as we can before that due date comes, because after that, I'm not sure how often we're going to get anywhere.
Maybe you'll be able to see a lot of movies at home.
Right.
And then a lot of
pausing involved.
Yep. Yeah. And then you'll be able to, as years go by, introduce your child to all the great movies that you like.
Correct.
which is like a whole other adventure.
Trust me, I'm lining up Miyazaki films.
Yes, especially because it's going to be a girl child. The strong women characters in Miyazaki is very important.
So great.
Right? Like, there's this podcast that I listen to, Hypercritical, and that's over now, but I remember the host was talking about strong female characters in Miyazaki, and then he was talking about Pixar and about how there aren't a lot of female characters in Pixar movies. And I remember he said he was listening to someone else, and they were talking about watching the movie Cars with their daughter. And the daughter asked, the dad, why don't the girl cars get to go out on the racetrack? And then the dad was like, you know what? Why don't the girl cars get to go out on the racetrack? That isn't fair.
John Lasseter, what do you have to say about this?
And then they made Brave.
Right. This week we are going to tell 2 stories of unconventional games that Carter and I have indulged in. And our first story comes from Carter, and it is the story of the PlayStation's game Journey.
I bought a PlayStation 3 just to play Journey.
I know, you told me that, which seems like a very expensive thing to do.
It does seem like an expensive thing to do, doesn't it? So
I hope you've gotten other things out of it.
I have. So the PlayStation 3, when I purchased it, was $230-some. I got the Uncharted pack because when I got my PlayStation 3, it was only available in, like, you can get the Uncharted pack or the Real Racing pack.
Right.
I'm like, whatever, I don't care. But it was about $200 and some odd dollars, $250 with tax.
Did it come with all the Uncharteds?
No, it came with the most recent one.
Oh, okay.
With Uncharted 3. They could have put the other 2 in there.
Because they're probably $20 or something.
Yeah, I don't think they're making like bank off of the old Uncharted games anymore. But whatever, I bought those too.
Anything Naughty Dog makes, I'm a fan of.
Yep, I also bought Last of Us. So I bought the PlayStation 3 to play Journey, but also for other things. So it's a Blu-ray player. I use it as a Blu-ray player, even though it is very loud. And I use it to stream Netflix to my TV, and I do other things with it. But if I couldn't have played Journey, I probably wouldn't have bought it at all. So it was the
impetus.
Yeah, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't know. There are better metaphors for this. I was told by enough people who I have enough respect for and who understand the types of games that I like and the types of experiences that I enjoy to play Journey that I felt compelled to go ahead and do this. And I probably, if I knew someone who owned a PlayStation 3 that I could have played Journey on and just borrowed it, I might have done that. But I didn't know anyone who had a PlayStation 3. None of my friends are big gamers. None of them had PlayStation 3. And now that the PlayStation 4 is out, in the future, I bet PlayStation 3s are going to be like $99 or less. So, you will be able to pick one up and play Journey yourself if you feel compelled to play it after this, if you haven't played it already. Journey is a PlayStation Network game. So you download it off of PSN for $15, which is, in the video game space that we live in today, on consoles, that's like nothing. I picked up Last of Us. It was like $55.
And I'm pretty sure, I know Journey was released on disc with the developer's previous games, and I'm sure you can find a used copy for even less.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very inexpensive, and it's very small, and it has a very, very nice feature baked into it that as you get older, you probably will learn to appreciate, and that is a very short playtime. You can play Journey in like 2 hours.
Right.
I understand the how an 80-hour Zelda game can be very fun, but I can't play that anymore.
There's no 80-hour Zelda game.
Whatever,
Final Fantasy.
For an 80-hour Final Fantasy game, or like a 40-hour Zelda game.
Sure.
A 40-hour, Skyward Sword. I'm like, I totally get the fun in that, but
you're not 12 years old.
I would rather get all my fun in 2 hours, and in like really interesting experiences.
A very rich experience.
Exactly. So, I've been playing the Uncharted games.
I feel like you've been playing it for a year.
I have been playing it for like half a year. I've just been slowly playing them, and they're not even that long. Honestly. You can play an Uncharted game in less than 20 hours, I think. Yeah, not if you're going to go through and get every like artifact or blah blah whatever. That's another thing that I don't like about games.
Collectibles.
I don't want to go on some, Easter egg hunt finding hidden treasure. That's not very fun to me. I don't have to complete all the stuff. That means nothing to me anymore. I just want like a really interesting experience. And I would like some emotion in a game, and I would like to walk away like feeling differently than I felt when I sat down to play the game.
It sounds like you're talking about movies.
It is. I'm looking for a movie that I can play.
Right.
Journey is a game about, if I was just going to very like try and shortly summarize it. Journey is a game where you play a character that's in the middle of a desert that is full of the crumbled remains of some vast civilization, and you're trying to make your way up to the top of a mountain in the distance. And you have to navigate obstacles and puzzles, and the main mechanic is that you can jump, and your jump is controlled by the length of a scarf, and you can pick up different bits of scarf as you go along. The longer the scarf you have, the higher and further you can fly. But that's not the most important or critical element of the game. And this is the big spoiler if you didn't know. So if you don't want this game spoiled for you, don't listen to this part. Journey is actually a multiplayer game, and you might not know it as you're playing it, because there's none of the accoutrements of a multiplayer game in Journey. That you don't see people's PlayStation Network handles. There's no system of joining people up. You don't join a server to play on Journey.
There's no method of communication.
There's no method to say words to each other. The only thing you can do is you can sing a song.
Right. You kind of you glow a little bit, and
yeah, you get a glyph above your head and you glow, and it makes a little noise.
Right.
And you can control the length of that. The longer you hold down that button, the louder and big that noise will be. And actually, other parts of the multiplayer experience aren't included either. You can't grief each other or hurt each other. In fact, if you're on a ledge and you try to knock someone off, you just pass right through them. And actually, when you touch someone in the game, it recharges their scarf. So all you can do is help people.
Right.
You can either be 100% passive, or you can help people. And the first time I played Journey, I had been spoiled on this mechanic, so I knew that there were other players, but I hadn't experienced it for myself. And I was playing along, and I found another character, and he was, or she, was just like pushing his little song thing, like boop 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 boop, and like obviously trying to get my attention. And I had a really short scarf. He found me like right after you get released from. There's a very short intro part where there are no other characters, and then you get released into the rest of the game where you can find people. He found me right there, and he played the game with me all the way to the end. And he was jumping around and showing me where to get parts of my scarf and how to do the puzzles and how to like see all the little like fun side things that show like, the tapestries that show the course of the civilization. And he was obviously investing a lot of time. He obviously wanted to show me like, here are all the cool places that you can go. And I've played Journey other times, and usually I have like a couple companions, like 2, 3, 4. First time I played it, one person all the way through, and I'll never forget this. There's a snow area, and when you're in it, there are these big, giant metal dragon creatures that are patrolling the sky.
They're actually kind of scary as hell.
Yeah, they're really scary, and they have this spotlight, and if the spotlight touches you, they like zoom down and they cut your scarf off. And the snow stage is really scary generally because the cold sort of like crusts up your scarf, and you can't use it unless you huddle for warmth. You have to like huddle together, and if you touch each other, your scarves will repair. And he was like timing everything out for us, so we knew exactly when to go, and getting us through these little like crates to hide from these creatures. And we were going, and I don't know what happened. I didn't quite hit the door fast enough. And one of the things came, and it hit both of us. And I felt so bad. I felt so bad that I was like, oh, I've ruined this for both of us, and you put so much time into it, and he was just like, doot, let's keep going, it'll be fine.
For all intents and purposes, it felt like it was really happening to you.
It did.
Like he was the hero, and he was showing you everything that you needed to know and helping you get there, and then you, the amateur, messed it up.
And I did mess it up. And I've never had a game do that for me, particularly in multiplayer. I almost never play the multiplayer element of a game.
Same.
Because I don't want a bunch of 12-year-olds saying disparaging things about my mother
or sister
or sister or myself. I also, even if you couldn't hear all that, I that feeling of, you know, the mature, experienced players and me being the amateur, I would just feel bad. I'd be like, oh, I suck. Like if I was playing like Team Fortress or something, and I'd be like, hey guys, I want to help out, and they're like, we're all awesome, why don't you know the maps? Like
exactly.
Whereas in this, I did feel bad because I messed something up, but you know, the other guy felt sympathy for me. And he wanted to help me because of the way that the game is structured. And then at the end, the other spoiler is once you get to the end and, you know, you don't know if you're dead or if, you know, you really did get to the end or whatever, almost all of the controls are unlocked for you and you can like fly forever. All the skills that you learned you can then use in this like big giant, you know, thing, and it's awesome. And I felt awesome playing it. And I find myself going back to Journey every once in a while, just because I'm like, oh, this is really great. In fact, I have the soundtrack, and when I'm doing coding at work, I'll put the Journey soundtrack on, particularly the song that plays at the end. It's like an 8-minute track on the soundtrack called Apotheosis. That's the music that plays at the end, and I'll just put it on a loop. And I can listen to that for hours. So if you haven't played Journey, if you think you might like a game like what I just described, or an experience like I just described, you should check Journey out.
I went through the game for the first time just like 2 months ago, and I knew that there was a multiplayer component, so that was also spoiled for me. But I didn't know what to expect besides that. I just didn't know what was going on, and the game pretty much tells you what to do without telling you what to do. It shows you what the controls are, but beyond that, it doesn't say anything else. And it's just kind of like, oh, well, there's a thing over there. I should probably go that way. And then the music is actually procedurally generated inside the game so that you feel a sense of like, oh, listen to the music swelling. I must be doing the right thing. I'm going the right way.
One thing on the procedural generation of that music, which is really awesome, like Portal 2, where it like heightens the music when you like do the jumps and stuff.
Yeah.
One of the coolest elements of Journey, one of the parts where I was just saying like I'm having so much fun, is you transition between one stage and another, and it's kind of like downhill in sand, and you're just sort of navigating through the sand, and the music
gets all snowboarding or something.
Right, but it's all bright and sand, and the music gets all playful and fast. And you can just kind of you're going through this hallway, and then you make a big sweeping turn, and it's just like, oh my god, I'm having a ridiculous amount of fun. It's like indescribable. And I was with my partner, and we just kept pushing the little song button back and forth because you could just tell that he was having fun too.
Yeah. I had experiences like that with the people I was with. I felt really bad because when I made it to the part with the big metal dragons you described, I had no idea what to do, and I was just getting attacked constantly, and my scarf was gone, and I was just like, I'm gonna die, even though there's no dying. You basically keep getting pummeled, and there's nothing that can actually like bring you to a game over.
Yeah, that's another thing about Journey, is you can't die. As far as I know, you can't die.
I don't think so. I think there's just one direction you can go. That's it.
I've fallen from very, very, very high, and you just fall. And then it's like, you got to get back up here somehow. Although I will say this, you can't die, but your companions can quit the game. Have you ever seen what happens when that happens?
No.
So your companion can like disconnect. And what happens is their body like disappears, and well, their body disappears, but their cloak is still there, and it slowly just starts dissolving into the sand.
Aw.
And it feels like, no, come back. What did I do? I didn't mean to.
Yeah, I felt bad because the first companion that I was with, I didn't realize that in order to continue on together, you needed to leave the area at the same time. And I just hurried ahead and I left them behind. And then I got to the next area and I was by myself again. I was like, where'd they go? And it wasn't until I looked it up later after I was done playing that I was like, oh, I left them behind because I'm a jerk.
Speaking of looking it up later, there's a I don't know if this is very popular anymore, but I know that when the game came out, there was a sticky thread on the main forum for Journey from that developer called
that developer, by the way, is called That Game Company.
That Game Company, but yeah.
You were close.
Thank you. I was struggling to think of it. There was a sticky thread in their forum called either Journey Stories, or I think it might have actually been Misconnections or something. It's people who played Journey, since you don't know who the people are until the end, and then you do see their name. But people were going onto that forum and posting things like, to the companion I had at the, at the Long Bridges, I didn't mean to leave you behind. I just couldn't make it up as fast as you.
It feels like Craigslist Misconnections.
Yeah, it's like I hope that you finished the game.
That's great.
It like actually provoked that kind of sense of community and that kind of sense of humanity in gamers, which is remarkable because gamers by and large are just
we're a bunch of jerks.
Yeah, it's, what's his name's internet fuckwad theory. Anonymity plus audience equals total fuckwad.
Yep.
Sean, you also have some very different things to say about an unusual video game, The Stanley Parable.
Yeah, I think I think you could say that both these games can't really exist without the 20 or 30 years behind us of video game history. Like this kind of experience wouldn't come about without all of the conventions that we're so used to. And The Stanley Parable is definitely a game that takes all of those conventions that you're used to and strips it back to its most basic bit, which is the disembodied first-person walk around an area kind of game, which could describe a whole host of games from Wolfenstein forward. And it basically is a game that makes you feel completely powerless over your existence. If you haven't seen it, it puts you in a room and tells you the story of yourself, a character named Stanley, who sits in a room and presses buttons on a keyboard as commands come on the screen. And essentially, they're talking about the entire video game experience, which is reacting to things that are on the screen and then pressing buttons. And in their case, it is actually an office building that Stanley works in. And then it's one of those until one day situations where one day no commands come on the screen. And that is the point that you take over control of the character and you discover that no one is in the office, no one is there. And the most unusual part about all this is that the narration that begins the game continues. It doesn't just start the game, it continues inside your head, quote unquote. And as you wander around the office, the narration continues to narrate what you're doing, much like the film Stranger Than Fiction with Will Ferrell, and it just seems completely aware of everything that's going on, and it tells you what to do when you get to your first choice of the game. You walk into a room that has two doors, and the narrator tells you specifically when Stanley entered the room, he went through the door on his left. And of course, being a gamer who might want to try and mess with a game, maybe try and break the map or exploit an area that you're not supposed to get to, you can make the very bold decision right then to ignore what the game is telling you to do. But of course, because this is that kind of game, you're actually not making a decision, because the decision has already been made for you that if you go left, one thing will happen, and if you go right, something else will happen. And basically, that is the entirety of the game. It just branches from there. There are a lot of decisions you can make or not make, and you can listen to the narrator at certain turns or not listen to him at others. And I think that the game has upwards of 12 different endings. It just goes on, and basically, it's just a listening experience. Yes, you get to move from point A to point B, but really all you're doing is listening to a very funny British narrator telling you silly, funny dialogue. And that's pretty much the whole thing. There's nothing more complicated than that. It's not Journey. It's such the opposite of self-discovery and stuff. It's just an experience. It's basically like reading a book or watching a film.
Yeah, so it was originally a mod to Half-Life 2.
Right, and it was free.
It was free. It was a free mod for Half-Life 2.
And then you can still download it. It is still available.
Yeah, and then they built this on Source and released it through Valve, right?
Yeah.
So it still is very much like Portal 2, Half-Life 2. And I think I remember when I played the mod, 2 years ago? 3 years ago? I don't know. A long time ago.
Came out in 2011.
Oh, yeah, about 2 years ago. Thinking that this is like a master's degree thesis in video game narrative, right?
Right.
And deconstruction of narrative in video game and story in video games. And I was skeptical that they would be able to make this into like a full quote unquote game to sell. And they proved me completely wrong. I haven't played it, but I've seen Sean's playthrough on the internet, and it contains a lot of the core nub of the original story, the original conceits.
Correct.
But they've added and expanded to it in so many ways, which I just thought was remarkable. One of the things I specifically remember the narrator saying in this new full version of the game, but I don't think he mentioned in the original mod, was something about, I suppose you're just going to try some other branches, like actually specifically addressing the meta game of
completely aware of the fact that you're just going to reboot it and try something else,
and specifically calling them branches, which everybody calls them, like speaking the same jargon as the people who are playing the game, which I was just like, this is just awesome. It's just so on point, and I don't know who the British guy is, but he's just a remarkable voice actor.
His name is Kevin Brading.
Is he like a presenter or like someone in
he's
UK?
It says that he's an actor. I have no other information on him.
He's just remarkable. He's so good. And
I don't think it would have been possible to do the full scale game without having him back. It just wouldn't have been the same thing.
It wouldn't have been.
He's so funny and condescending, and he just perfectly captures the frustrating. He makes you feel so frustrated in your inability to do anything.
Yeah. Did you see the trailer? One of the trailers that they did for the game, where he's replying to someone who emailed in that about the mod, about this game sucked. There was no emotional experience, and I wasn't able to make any choices. So he designs a game specifically for that person, and it's like, you can go into these booths which make you feel emotions.
Right.
And just and then you can toggle up the different levels of emotionality and theme. You can, if you want more theme, just drag the theme slider up and you'll get more theme. If the story is not very interesting, drag the interesting slider up higher. And I'm just like, this is amazing, because it is a big just middle finger to a lot of people, but it's a very fun middle finger. It's very interesting what they did with it.
And it's really fun to for someone who's experienced it and has a lot of video game experience to put someone who doesn't have that experience in front of the game and see what they do.
You mentioned that you put your dad in front of it and he tried to jump.
Yeah, there's an achievement specifically in the standalone game that if you press spacebar like 3 times, it'll give you an achievement that says you can't jump. And because I wouldn't have tried to jump because I'm so aware of what the game is and I know that I can't jump, I just never tried. And the very first thing my dad did is walk to one of the desks and try to jump on it. And he got that achievement. And I was like, what did you just do? He's like, I tried to jump. And I was like, oh, you can't jump. Oh, you can't jump. It says that right there.
Now that I think about it, didn't the mod kind of play with that a little as well? Because one of the endings puts you in the beginning of Half-Life 2 and you can jump?
Yes.
I think I remember that.
The main, what I consider the main lines of the game are the line where you do everything that the narrator says, which he actually, like, he promises you at the beginning that if you follow his instructions, you will be freed from it. And he actually follows through on that. If you do everything that he says, he lets you out. And you get into this, like, field with trees and butterflies and flowers, and that's the end. It's boring, but it's the end. And then my other favorite branch is the one where you disobey every single thing that the narrator says to do. And in the original mod, you essentially come to a undeveloped space that's just full of blank textures and stuff. So he loads up a different game. And in that case, it was Half-Life 2. He loads up the very first chapter of Half-Life 2. And in the standalone version, it loads Minecraft. Which was so awesome and so unexpected. I had no idea that that was about to happen. I was caught so off guard.
I'm so surprised that I hadn't been spoiled on that, because when I saw that, I was just like, because it's not just a little bit like Minecraft. It's Minecraft.
It's Minecraft.
Like, the textures, that it sounds like Minecraft.
I'm sure they in fact, it's so exactly the same that they must have talked to Mojang and just been like, hey, we're going to parody this just for a bit. Is that okay? Because I would be worried that I'd get sued.
Right. And I think I remember you specifically when you were doing your playthrough, you were in a little trough of grass and you're like, I can't jump. How am I going to get out of this?
I can't get out.
Because I can't break blocks either. Like, uh-oh. Video games place crazy. They mess with your brain, right? You know, I can feel, you know, touched and like this deep emotion from following the instructions on a game and pressing the buttons, and you can feel like this crazy frustration and this, the sense of like, everything's the worst, and I can't jump. Why even try?
Exactly.
Video games can place that into your head, and that, that's a really remarkable thing. That's why I spent $250 on PS3 so I could play Journey, and that's why I buy games on my PC as well, but not on my Mac because you can't play games on Macs.
I'm just thrilled that even here, 30 years into the history of modern day pop culture gaming, things continue to surprise just about every single year. There's always something new and interesting going on. Hello, I'm Sean, and this podcast broke the internet.
And I'm Carter, and breaking the internet this week, the 86th Academy Awards. Who do you think's going to win, Sean?
Everything?
Everything.
Ellen DeGeneres.
Ellen DeGeneres. I think so, too. She's a good pick. I really miss the days of, like, Billy Crystal, you know?
Oh, okay. How old are you? Are you allowed to do that?
I wish I lived in a time when they were good. Like
I wish it was Bob Hope.
The Bob Hope. I just flew in here, and boy, my wing's tired. The jokes were more jokey, and it was shorter, right? They've just become interminably long.
Yeah, well, they've added categories. They've removed a few, but they've added more.
I don't know. I just feel like we had a string of really bad hosts, and I think Ellen did a fair job last time. Hopefully.
Yeah, even Jon Stewart, who I love dearly, but Stu Beef, that was a weird year.
He did terribly.
It also didn't help that 3-6 Mafia was...
Mm-hmm. Yep, 3-6 Mafia. They were
Remember
high.
when that happened?
Remember when 3-6 Mafia won an Academy Award? That
and
happened.
Just went completely apeshit on the air?
Yeah. it was just like a cloud of weed smoke was like following them up onto the stage, and they were just like going, ah! And there was another song that was clearly should have won, and you could just see those people like being like, "Oh no!" I think it was the song from like Crash or something. The only good thing about that movie was the song that got nominated for it.
And then Stewart walked out there and he's like, "That's the way you're supposed to win an Academy Award," and then the whole room was probably like, "No."
Best of luck to Ellen DeGeneres. So we're gonna just kind of talk. We're gonna break our format a little because this is a podcast that breaks things.
Right. Correct.
And we're allowed to do that now that we've established ourselves, right?
Yeah, we're deeply entrenched.
We're a tent pole of the internet and breaking it. So we're just gonna kind of talk a little bit about the categories and what we think about the nominees, and maybe make some predictions. If I know us, and we've gone through this a few times now, the Academy Awards and predictions, we will be very hand wavy, wishy-washy, like, well, maybe this, but maybe that. I don't know. This is what maybe. But we're going to kind of do it a little bit Academy style and work our way sort of from the bottom of the category list and end with Best Picture. So we're going to start.
Clearly some awards are better than others.
Well, that's why they've got that's why they have so many of them in the Don't Call It the Oscars. That happens like Thursday before or whatever.
Right.
The technical Oscars, I believe. Kathy Griffin calls it the. Oh no, that's the Emmys. She calls the Schmemmys. But they do the same thing for the Academy Awards.
I wonder which attractive starlet is hosting the technical awards this year.
I don't know. That's something that it's like Scarlett Johansson or.
It's always some hottie because that room is full of like a bunch of sweaty old dudes.
Mm-hmm. And instead of hosting it in like some like awesome thing, they host it at like a Marriott.
It's a convention center.
Yeah. We're not talking about those awards, but we're going to talk about a few awards that maybe you don't always hear about. And the first of those we're going to talk about is the nominees for Best Original Score. John Williams, man, he's still doing stuff.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it, but is it breaking any new ground?
I mean, like, how much new ground do you think can be broken in scores?
I don't know, but I would argue that Gravity, or perhaps Her, go a completely different direction with what I think a film score could be.
I think you're right. You should talk a little bit about that. But before you do, I will mention that I when I hear a particularly good score, I have a habit of just downloading it immediately on my phone, and I did that with Gravity.
I did that too.
Well, what did you think about that score? What do you think was so special about it?
Well, I think you were the person who pointed out that the score is practically as long as the film itself.
Mm-hmm.
So that means most of the music is scored, which is fantastic. And when you watch it, the music is so completely tied to what you're seeing on the screen that when you listen to the score later, you can practically visualize the entire film. And the film has those points, like the points of rising action that your English teacher would draw on a board. And the music completely coincides with every moment of rising action. You feel it in the score, and your heart beats faster, and you see what's going on with Sandy Bullock on the screen. And you're like, oh my gosh, is she going to make it? And this music builds to that big crescendo. And that's what really cements the whole feeling inside you.
Agreed. When I listen to the portion of the score, I listen to it a lot at work. When I listen to the portion of the score when she is stranded in the Russian Soyuz capsule and she's talking to the dude, and it's just quieter music. Yeah. I can just feel it. That I'm like, oh yeah, that's so lonely and so sad. And I think one thing that's interesting about the score is one thing that you'll hear commentators or movie pundits whine about sometimes is that too much of a movie it gets scored, and that directors should find ways of having quiet parts of the movie, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's because a lot of scores are not great.
Yeah, I think it depends on who's doing it.
Yeah, and in this case, the score was so good that you almost forget that there was a score in certain parts, and you're like, oh yeah, there was music there, but it was just part of. It's almost like it, the editing. It's like it was part of the movie in a really distinct way. So yeah, I really like the Gravity score. I would not be surprised if that's the one that wins for Best Original Score.
And I think the Her score stood out because it really fit the tone of the film really well. And then when I learned about it later and how they actually did it, it was basically like Spike Jonze sat in a room with the members of Arcade Fire who scored the film, and they just like watched scenes from the movie, and they had a bunch of instruments in there, and one of them would pick up an instrument and like start trying something, and if it worked they would build on it, and if it didn't work they'd try something else. And it was literally just collaborating right between the filmmaker who originated the screenplay and made the movie with all the musicians in the same room. It was not like here, you go off and do this thing and come back to me and we'll see if it fits. It was creation with all of the pieces right in the same room.
Do you think because of the effort that Arcade Fire put into that score, that's the reason why Reflector wasn't that great? Their new album. Yeah.
I don't know.
They poured all their heart and soul into the Her soundtrack, and then they worked on Reflector, and I was like, nah, fine. They used one of the songs from Her and reworked it and put it on Reflector, actually. I don't remember. I can't remember which one, but
I know that the Her score has not been released.
I was just about to say, I'm surprised I don't have it. Is that why I don't have it? I wonder.
I don't know what's going on with it, because someone asked Spike Jonze about it on Reddit, and he said that he didn't know what was going on with it.
Huh, interesting. Well, Her has had a complicated release as well, but we don't need to talk about that right now. The other Best Original Score nominees, neither of us have seen. So who knows? Maybe the Philomena score was just like blew Gravity out of the water, blew it out of the atmosphere.
Right.
But we don't know. If I had to pick between Her and Gravity, I would say the Gravity score is better, and I think it's very deserving of the win.
That would be my pick.
All right. Well, we're going to move right along to a category that Sean and I probably have a lot to say about, and that's production design. Remember when this used to be called something else? Production design used to be called
set
something.
Dressing.
Set dressing? Yeah,
I don't
set
know.
Dressing.
Is it?
Or art design?
Best interior decoration, and then best art direction.
Best art direction.
And now best production design.
Which is much more hitting the nail on the head what they're talking about. All of the technical aspects of the things that you see that are filmed.
Right.
So the sets, but also not including the costumes and the makeup and that stuff, but like the sets and the cars and the computers. Like I would say that Her is a great nominee for production design because it's such a fully realized world, and that's recognizing the like realization of the world.
Right.
So what thoughts do you have about the movies here? We've seen a lot of these movies.
Her specifically had a number of things that it's one of those near future films, which that always that walks a dangerous line, because you don't want to make it look too futuristic. You don't want like a Jetsons future, but you also don't want it to look too much like now. And I think that Spike Jonze and his production designer K.K. Barrett and Gene Sardina, sure,
yeah,
found that perfect balance where there are things going on in the scenes that you don't even have to pay attention to, that once you do, you're like, oh, that's not like a real thing. That's something that they made up for the future that exists there. And even the fact that L.A. seems to be much more polluted in the future than it is now. At some point during the film, I was like, oh, look at how gross L.A. looks.
Yeah.
Because that's the way it would actually look in 20 or 30 years.
Yeah. I think they nailed the near future thing with Her. I can't think of another movie that did it the way that I like it to be done. You got movies like Minority Report, where it's like, that's not what it's gonna be like. We're not gonna have this sprawling new infrastructure for these cars that can go sideways.
Yeah, where did these come from?
Right, and scale walls, jetpacks, and like it's not gonna happen. It's just not gonna be that way. There's just so many little things in Her that I'm like, yes, you nailed it. Like the improved transit system in LA, or the phones. They finally did a movie where they have futuristic looking phones, but they don't look fakey fake.
I want his phone.
I love it. It's thick. right? So I'm sure it feels really good in your hand. Cameras on both sides, and it flips open. What a brilliant idea,
Yeah,
right?
it opens like a book.
Opens like a book. Well, you know what it reminds me of a little bit of? Do you remember the Microsoft Surface, I think it was called? It was like a tablet that opened like a book.
Yeah.
And they had all these, Microsoft like, oh, we're imagining the future. And I was like, yeah, that's really, really cool. Really great idea. And I'm like, yes, I want that phone. And a little earpiece. I'm like, yeah, I like that. I hate having wires going from my earbuds to my phone because I get up and they get caught on the arm of my chair and they pull out. And I'm like, nah, why isn't it the future yet? Yeah, I think the production design there was pretty incredible. And on the total opposite end of the spectrum, you had the design in American Hustle, which was looking back to the 70s. But it was like the 70s.
Right. And that's a completely different thing. That one, I'm sure they referred to hundreds and thousands of images and video, and they were filming in specific locations for things that actually happened. So I'm sure that they just started researching what those places actually looked like, and then finding that horribly disgusting wallpaper or the gross carpet or that dusty radiator that was in all of those rooms.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt authentic.
Yeah, I mean, every single piece of it was just very perfect. I can't speak highly enough about the production design in American Hustle. I think that might be my favorite aspect of the movie because it's the other things it was nominated for. I think it was a little bit weaker. And the production design in Gravity is also very different. But you know what? It struck me when I was watching Gravity was you saw the space shuttle, and I'm like, oh, the space shuttle doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, this must take place in like the 90s or something. And I was like, yeah, I can see that. And then I'm like thinking back to, did you ever, when you were in elementary school or something, when the space shuttle took off, they like would bring you all in and you watch it on the TV?
Right. Yes.
I'm like, yeah. They totally hit a lot of those things. And then one thing that I'm thinking of specifically is the cloud of debris. All of those little pieces, as far as I know, are maybe not exactly one-to-one matched up to things that they researched, but they kind of are. Like every little screw, every little piece of the space station and the shuttle and the arm and everything that oh, by the way, spoiler alert, there's a big debris cloud in Gravity that's a central part of the movie. They researched very carefully how everything works, and then figured out, okay, if we hit it and it exploded, what would all the pieces be and what would they look like and what would they do?
Yeah, I'm sure they took certain licenses for dramatic purposes, but why wouldn't you have a computer simulation sitting in front of you, why wouldn't you just tear it apart and see what happens?
Exactly. The one big thing I know that is not true is the guy who gets hit in the head, it would not have just like caused a hole. It would have exploded his, if something had hit his faceplate, the differential between the whatever would
the
have
pressure.
Exploded. Yeah. It would have exploded. It wouldn't have just been a straight hole, but whatever. It still looked cool.
Yeah. It was to give you that kind of undersea feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have we talked about Gravity before?
No.
That is so... Yes, when you talk about undersea, that is something that I felt in that movie.
Yeah, me too.
Even though it was in space, it felt like it was underwater.
Yeah,
it is
a marine adventure in space.
Yeah, the sense of danger was the same kind of sense of danger that you experience with water. All right, moving right along. Writing. So, Best Original Screenplay. Does David O. Russell just always get nominated for this category now? I don't think the writing in I thought the writing was very weak in American Hustle. I didn't think it deserved to get nominated.
I wouldn't vote for it. I don't know what belonged in its place in the list of nominees, but yes.
The story itself was very, especially the last third. It's like, what is going on? He didn't line thing like a story. You should feel pulled through the story, and you don't necessarily know exactly what's going to happen, but there should be things that build upon themselves so that it unfolds a little bit before you. And I felt like the last third of American Hustle was like, whoa, this is totally weird. I don't. Oh, okay. Wait, what? He's doing what now? Oh, I get it, I guess. And it was just very muddled, and I was very frustrated with it by the end.
I think it thought that it was cleverer than it actually was.
It wanted to be Goodfellas. It wanted to be Goodfellas, but it wasn't.
I think when I explained the film to you, I said something about it's as close to a Scorsese movie that David O. Russell is ever going to get.
David O. Russell should just do his movies. I think that's another thing. He co-wrote this with someone else. I thought that Silver Linings Playbook was great writing. Compared to American Hustle, it was so much better.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, maybe he was just trying something new, and he'll realize, like, oh, I shouldn't do this. And that's why his next movie is going to be Jennifer Lawrence as a single mom with 3 kids or something, that I've heard. But I just thought, yeah, maybe he was either out of his element or out of his depth with this, or, maybe he was trying to rip off Scorsese and he didn't do a particularly good job.
Someone else said this. I don't remember who. Someone said David O. Russell writes screwball movies and he inserts them in whatever genre of film he's making. Because he's made war movies, he's made rom-coms, he's made legal gangster, whatever American Hustle is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works, and sometimes you see the seams of the construction. And I think that's what American Hustle felt like.
Well, okay, so I can do this with Her in Nebraska. I didn't see the other two besides American Hustle, but can you describe American Hustle in, like, can you give an elevator pitch of American Hustle, or like describe it in a sentence?
I don't know.
Yeah. So if you can't describe it in like a sentence or two, there's probably something wrong, and it's not because it's like Tree of Life, Right. It's not the new world. Well, I don't know why I keep going back to his movies. But it's not like it's so mind-blowing and whatever. It's like, no, it's just like a mess, right? Like my elevator pitch for Her, it's, takes place in the future, and it's about this kind of sad sack guy who falls in love with his computer.
Period.
Nebraska. It's about an alcoholic father and son who drive to Nebraska and, learn about each other's pasts. Boom. That's it. That's what the movie's about.
American Hustle is about several different people who have interconnected stories, and there's a bad guy and a good guy, and too late. The guy already walked out of the elevator.
It's about abscam. Abscam. It's like, what's abscam? That sounds racist. So neither of us saw Blue Jasmine, and neither of us have seen Dallas Buyers Club. But you may see it before, so maybe if we have follow-up, you can mention that. Between Her and Nebraska, I am really torn between what I would think is the better writing. I thought that both of them were very... Mm-hmm, yeah.
I'm so mad that I can't find this film Nebraska playing anywhere. And you said it's grossed less than $10 million?
Mm-hmm.
It's just not playing anywhere.
It's not playing anywhere. It debuted at Cannes, and it had a theatrical release in November in America, and I can't even find an article that says how many screens it's on. So it was probably under 1,000. And at this point, I bet it's under 100. Literally under 100 screens in America, probably.
We'll have to wait for Netflix.
I'll have to wait for Netflix. It was a remarkable film. It was a really, really amazing film. The writing, the thing about it that was so good was that it really captured real people, and you can see. It's almost like I'm surprised that it's an original screenplay and it wasn't adapted from someone's book.
Okay.
But then you have in Her just a very complex story that's interesting. Hey, David O. Russell, you can have a complex story and have it be understandable and comprehensible.
I think one of the things I liked most about Her was it was perfect pacing.
Yes, that's true.
Which also has a lot to do with editing, but it starts with the screenplay, and Spike Jonze just nailed it.
Yeah, when I talk about pacing with people, the way that I describe how I know that a movie has good pacing is every single time your attention starts to wander, something happens,
Right.
and you're right back into it, and you're like, oh, yes, and it just like comes at you, and yeah.
Every 15 or 20 minutes in Her, when I started to wonder what could possibly happen, something happened that I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was about to happen.
Yeah. Another reason why I think it is a really good screenplay is that it takes a really crazy idea, and and some of this is the performances, but it takes a really pretty outlandish idea, and by the end of it, I think most people are fairly bought into it.
Mm-hmm.
In my theater, there were some people who were like, that's dumb. It's a dude falling in love with a computer. And I'm like, yes, but it's not.
But it's not. It's like when we talked about Robot and Frank. It is about something, but it's about something else.
Yeah. So I can see how some people couldn't be brought on board for that. But the fact that it is the story about a man falling in love with his computer, and you are with it, that speaks very highly to the writing.
Yes.
Spike Jonze. Renaissance man.
And he did win the Golden Globe, so that bodes well for his chances.
So in adapted screenplays, one thing that kind of drives me crazy is that movies like The Wolf of Wall Street are called an adapted screenplay. Like The Social Network or whatever, where they take just like, here are the real things that happened to someone, and here's our source material. And in The Wolf of Wall Street, it was 2 different books. It wasn't even one book. And then they're like, no, it's adapted. Does that frustrate you at all, or do you just not care?
It is kind of strange, because just because it happened in real life doesn't mean that the person who wrote the story adapted anything.
Right. And if it had happened in real life and there was no book, it would be original, right?
Yes.
I think that it is probably almost like, not legal exactly, but it's like, well, they had to option those books.
I guess.
Right, they had to pay Jordan, to get the rights to those books.
Yeah. He got $1 million for that.
Seriously?
Yes. He didn't, because I was curious after the film was over if he was getting money for the film. Because once you learn what kind of creep this guy is, you're like, I feel dirty for spending money on this movie if he's getting any of the money. And it turns out, no, he was not getting any money for the production of the film. However, his book was optioned for $1 million. So he made $1 million at one point for the option of the film.
Yeah. He has a very small role at the very end of the movie. And
he introduces himself.
I know, I love that. And yeah, he does seem like a total creep. It's one thing to know that this all happened, but it's like Leonardo DiCaprio was a beautiful actor, and this guy is not beautiful. He's just kind of gross.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, even the most I can't believe that this actually happened moments actually happened. It's bizarre.
Yeah, that's one thing that I did read that so basically nothing is made up.
Nope.
Every single thing that happened in that movie happened.
It doesn't make any sense.
I know. I didn't see the rest of the adapted screenplay movies, but you saw Captain Phillips.
I saw Captain Phillips. I would say it's a good popcorn movie. Not exactly the dramatic tension that I'm sure exists in, for instance, 12 Years a Slave, or probably even Before Midnight.
Right. I don't have a really good read. Oh, if I was going to pick what the best writing is, I think I just didn't say this explicitly. I think it would be between her and Dallas Buyers Club, but in terms of who's going to how the vote will go.
Yeah, I think so.
So I don't have a really good read on adapted screenplay. I have a feeling like one of the things that tends to happen in the Academy Awards is that movies that kind of get slighted for the bigger pictures will get kind of like a runner-up award, like best writing. So like 12 Years a Slave might not win best picture, but if it doesn't, then it might get best adapted screenplay.
Yeah, sure.
Because, and you can like think of how an Academy voter is doing that, right? They're making the decisions, they're working down their ballot, and they're like, well, I gave it to whatever, Dallas Buyers Club, and they're in separate categories for writing, so I don't have to think about that, so maybe I'll just give it to 12 Years.
Yeah. And that sounds strange, but that is the way that people vote.
Right, exactly. These are human people voting down a ballot, so. So the supporting actor and actress categories, I think we had some specific things we wanted to talk about, right?
Yeah, a friend of mine who has seen Dallas Buyers Club said he came into work and he was like, "It's Jared Leto, man. He's amazing." And I believe him because Jared Leto only acts in a few things because he's one of those jack of all trades. He can do anything. And he was great in Requiem for a Dream. And he's playing, a transgender person?
Mm-hmm. A male to female transgender.
I'm sure he is amazing. But I haven't seen it. And I have seen Wolf of Wall Street. And I know that Jonah Hill definitely deserved this nomination because he is that person. He's not Jonah Hill in that movie. He's not the 21 Jump Street, super bad, whatever Jonah Hill. He's Donnie Azoff.
Yeah, that's another one of those. We were talking before we recorded about how Spike Jonze is just like such a prolific person. He's done so many things, and it's surprising to see that, coming from like being, skateboarder, making like little music videos and stuff, that he's now this like really epic writer and director. Same thing with Jonah Hill, man. It's like, I think back to him. You know what I think back to when I think of Jonah Hill is in 40-Year-Old Virgin when he wants to buy the. Did you see that?
Yeah.
When he wants to buy the boots that have the goldfish in them from the we sell your stuff on eBay store, and he's just like, no, but I want to buy them here.
I have money.
I want to wear them out or whatever, and it's just like, well, it's like such a little weird, strange role. And
wasn't that his first film appearance? I think it was.
Yep, I think it was. Did you also see the Sunday morning interview of him?
No.
Where I learned all this? Yeah, no. So and then he did all those. Actually, it was. I'm probably getting this wrong. It might have been Scorsese who got him started, but now I'm thinking it was actually Judd Apatow. But I can't remember. But then he did all those Judd Apatow movies, and it's just like whatever. And then he gave such a great performance in Moneyball, and you're like, oh wow, he actually can act a little.
Mm-hmm.
And then
he made you feel things in Moneyball.
I just have a lot of feelings because of Jonah Hill. Yeah, he really sold it. But then I was thinking like, well, I'm not an actor, but I have acted in a lot of things in high school. And one thing I know is that someone who is a good kind of comic actor can be persuaded by the right director and with the right writing to give a pretty decent dramatic performance. And I was like, okay, so I was like, that's what Jonah Hill did. Like, he had a good director, the writing was really solid, and they really coached him through it, and he did it. And he tried really hard, and he did it. But now I see him in Wolf of Wall Street, and I'm like, no, man, he can just like act.
He can do this.
He can like figure out a character and be that character. That's what acting is.
It was not just a fluke. He actually knows what he's doing.
It was tremendous. I really hope he wins. I really, really hope he wins. Jennifer Lawrence, man, she is Meryl Streep.
She's the new one.
She's Meryl Streep. Wouldn't have believed it just a couple years ago.
Acting on the Jeff Foxworthy show?
You were really in favor of her and were on the Jennifer Lawrence train way early, and while I was still a skeptic.
I don't know what it was. I have no idea what solidified it for me.
Winter's Bone.
But probably. I didn't even see that first or anything. Like, I went back, and then I was like, oh, yeah, she's got it.
You know what? This is something that I do. I saw Winter's Bone and really liked it, and I just didn't put together that she was that person.
Oh.
For a while. Because I don't know, because I'm dumb. But yeah, she gave like such a crazy good performance in Winter's Bone. Why did she get nominated for this?
It is honestly her most inconsistent performance that I've seen.
I thought that she, of all the actors in the movie, I think that she was the one, besides Christian Bale, she was the one working the hardest. But it didn't really do much for me. Yeah. If that makes sense. I could tell that she was really pulling a Jennifer Lawrence. Every time I see someone talk about her, like a director or whatever, they're like, man, she just like technically is perfect. Like, she just knows her lines and knows the character. And I think
the big thing is she really knows how to react in a scene, especially with people around her like Christian Bale. Mm-hmm. that's important. That's really important. You can't just do your lines. You have to know how to react to what is happening.
Yes, I think that she is. Yes, she's very good at that. And I always hear these stories about her of like she'll just be like joking and kind of whatever, being hamming it up on the set, and then
the cameras turn on,
and then she just becomes the character and she's doing it. You know, like Laurence Olivier or whatever, like knows it so thoroughly and what she has to do. She knows what she has to do.
I bet Olivier would have loved her.
Mm-hmm.
After seeing My Week with Marilyn, where Olivier is a character and he just gets so fed up with the way that Marilyn acts, I bet he would have loved Jennifer Lawrence.
I bet she would have really liked him. I bet they would have gotten along, and I bet that like you would see photos of them on the set just like being total
having the best
hams.
time.
Yeah, while everyone else is like, oh, I'm an actor, I'm a whatever, and they were just like, what? Fuck you. And acting is just
it's
like
a job.
Whatever. It's a job. You do it. You know, like you do.
I'm not like a surgeon or anything.
Right. You know, it's like I think some of the best actors are the ones who are realize that yes, this is a job and everyone should take pride in their work no matter what you do, and if you do that in acting, you'll give really good performances and sometimes you get to go to fancy awards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why she got nominated. I really did they just have to nominate 5 people and they couldn't think of someone else, or
I don't think they have to. It has to exceed a certain percentage and whatever, and then they just take the top 5. So she was in the top 5.
Well, I think that this is the one of the few categories where I think the consensus is landing on Lupita. I can't pronounce her last name.
Yes.
In 12 Years a Slave.
Yes.
That's what I've heard.
That's what Entertainment Weekly cast for this category.
Yeah, I've been hearing her name a lot. Sort of similar to what was the little girl who won for oh no.
I even know what you're talking about. Quivanjene Wallace. Yeah,
and I cannot think of the name of the movie.
The movie in the bath.
Yeah, it's the New Orleans movie with magical realism. I will put in a plug for June Squibb in Nebraska. Her performance was awesome. A lot of it was the writing. It was very, very good writing.
Mm-hmm.
She is such a believable old woman who is in a probably not awesome marriage, but you just kind of don't like her because you're like, you don't support your husband very much. And that's kind of like the attitude that her younger son takes. But then as the movie unfolds, you just begin to like her more and more, even though she's a total bitch.
Mm-hmm.
And she has the best line of the movie too. So she will not win, but it was good that she was nominated.
And the others in the category are Julia Roberts in that movie that no one saw.
Yeah,
with Meryl Streep, and Sally Hawkins, who every time I see her, she's great, but she was in that Woody Allen movie, and I don't have much faith in that part.
Yeah, so I think it really comes down between Lupita and Jennifer Lawrence, and boy, I hope Jennifer Lawrence doesn't win as much as I like her.
And the thing that history shows is that actors don't win twice 2 years in a row. The last time it happened was Tom Hanks between 94 and 95 for Philadelphia and Forrest Gump.
Well, yeah.
So I think anyone who's voting, again, they're just human, are going to know that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And they're going to be like, well, this Lupita woman is amazing, and she's never acted in anything before. I should probably give it to her.
Yeah. And Jennifer Lawrence, she's no Tom Hanks in Philadelphia and Forrest Gump.
Nope.
Those performances were some of the best
of
his generation.
His career, yeah.
Yeah, so, no, sorry, but we love you, Jennifer Lawrence, but
I don't think she's going to be too broken up over it.
Yeah,
She's always surprised when she wins.
Yeah, exactly.
Tripping over her dress and all that.
I know. All right, so we come to the actors and the actresses, and I'm very torn in both of these categories between who I think should win. Although I know this for sure. Amy Adams was not the best actress this year. In no way. I am just like, no. Putting my foot down.
She looked great in the 70s clothes with that big blown out hair, but
yeah, she looked great. I don't think she was.
No.
I don't think she brought it. and I didn't really see a lot of the other movies, so I can't speak very much to the actress category. I do have a lot of thoughts on the actors. Do you have any thoughts on the actress?
Has Sandra Bullock won? Did she win for The Blind Side?
She won for The Blind Side.
Okay.
And she's only been nominated for The Blind Side and Gravity in her life, which is not surprising because, you know what? I feel really bad for her because I feel like I've seen so many articles and bloggers being like, Sandra Bullock is not a good actress. And I'm like, you know what? Shut up. She might do very practical, everyday movies, but she was really good in Gravity. I liked her
She's been really good for a very long time.
Yes, she's a very solid actress. She's a working actress, even though she does make lots of money and whatever. She shows up and she acts, and she, just because she's in Ocean's 50 or whatever, doesn't. Oh, that was Julia Roberts, but whatever.
Miss Congeniality.
Miss Congeniality or The Net.
Right.
Just because she's in movies that are kind of like, mass appeal entertainment movies, it doesn't mean that she's not a good actress.
And
just means that
based on the production of that film and everything that she had to go through to do that movie, it sounds like an incredibly harrowing experience.
Yeah, and if you don't see yourself in her and you don't see, humanity in her performance, and hey, like, she is the only actor in that movie, really. I mean, how much screen time does George Clooney have in that? Maybe 10 minutes total?
Yeah, less than 15.
And then you got, what's his name in Houston, reprising his role from Apollo 13, Ed Harris, which I thought was what a stroke of genius that was. She made that movie.
She is the movie.
I don't think you can at the same time say that Gravity is potentially the best picture of the year and not say that Sandra Bullock was the best actress.
It kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah. I am torn between who I want to win and who I think will win best actor.
Based on that, I think that you want Bruce Dern to win.
Do. But do you think Matthew McConaughey is going to win, don't you think?
I think so.
Right?
I think that movie will take actor and supporting actor.
You do.
It sounds like that's just that kind of, it's the movie that they made. It hinges on those two men, and they're amazing in their roles.
God, I'm kicking myself now for not having seen it. I had an opportunity to see it, and I saw a Paranormal Activity movie.
Consistent with our history.
Yeah, well, I knew what was going to happen. I've made my choices and I can live with them.
I think Nebraska is going to go down as like the last. It's Peter O'Toole's Venus. Like it's the last opportunity for a great 20th century actor to get an award for a performance, and I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many more movies Bruce Dern is going to do. He's 77. His major work was in the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah.
And I think that every decade or so he does like a big movie, and this was his movie. He's the heart and soul of this movie. He just killed me. He made me feel a lot of feelings, and I really wish that he would take it, but I think it's going to be Matthew McConaughey, and I don't think that there's any chance. I don't know about the 12 Years a Slave actor because I didn't see it, but I don't think there's any chance in the world that Christian Bale or Leonardo DiCaprio are going to win this award.
No.
Any chance.
Nope.
So,
Leo just gets internet memes.
Whatever. He should do better movies or act better. Act better, Leo.
That's the problem. Alfonso Cuarón was my favorite filmmaker from the moment that I saw Children of Men. That was another movie that I went to see 3 times. See, it started with Children of Men, and then before that he made one of the Harry Potter films, which I didn't put that connection together until later when I realized what the thing was that I was liking so much about Children of Men, and it came down to him. This man, the most interesting thing is he's not a James Cameron. he's not the guy who thinks of the like really cool technical concept and then builds a movie around it. He thinks of a really great idea, a really good story to tell, and then he lets his whole production team worry about the crazy lights and sounds that are going to make it happen.
When we were talking about near futures, the near future in Children of Men, while it is dystopian and unlikely, is another one that I'm like, yeah, that could happen. That looks like it could be the future.
Also reminiscent of Half-Life 2.
Yeah, he's incredible. Am I right that he had the idea for Gravity, him and his brother, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like 12 years ago?
It's actually his son.
Oh, his son!
Yes.
Oh, I didn't put that together.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
they had it like
they've
a really
shot
long time
this
ago.
around for a while.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe not that long ago, but for a long time. And really it was just like the technology didn't exist to do it.
Yes.
And if you've seen it, you'll probably know why.
Even by the third time when I was actually trying to figure out how they did everything, I still couldn't. There were some scenes that I was just like, I give up. I don't know how they're doing this.
How do they shoot?
It's probably like seeing Star Wars in 1977. You're just
Probably.
like, I don't understand how this happened.
I haven't seen it 3 times, but one that I'm thinking of is when she makes it to the Chinese space station.
Yeah.
She like propels herself down a long corridor, and I'm like, how are they doing that? How is she being? Because it looks like she's floating, and the camera isn't. There's no edits. What?
And she's not moving.
She's not moving.
She's
but
not
she's
moving.
She's not moving, but she's moving through space, and I'm like, how are you doing this?
I think the opening shot that is actually probably it goes like something like 12 or 15 minutes without a quote unquote cut.
Mm-hmm.
But once you've seen it enough times, you realize that there are probably 50 different edits in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so much compositing and motion control camera that it just is completely seamless. You don't realize where the cuts are.
What about the rest of the directors? David O. Russell. I think that he probably did deserve to get this award because the direction must have been quite taxing.
Yeah.
On American Hustle.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there are huge problems with the direction.
No,
as much as there
I
are
think
with the
that
writing.
the performances that he gets are enough for him to merit a nomination. Like just about any time he makes a movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that he worked hard and he deserved to get nominated. He doesn't deserve to win in any way, but I that's probably the least offensive award for American Hustle. I think is. Is production design, but runner-up is best director. I thought he did fine. Martin Scorsese. I don't think Alexander Payne is going to win for Nebraska, and once again, 12 Years a Slave is that one that I'm just like, I don't know. I really think that
wild card.
It's my wild card, so it might be that. I really think that this is a race between Alfonso Cuarón and Martin Scorsese, and you think it's just going to be Cuarón's just going to take it. That is just right.
Hands down, that's my pick.
I think that in the minds of the voters, there is a race though between these two directors, because The Wolf of Wall Street it almost goes too far. In some places, I might have gone too far in some places. The famous George Lucas line. It's like it looks like a Scorsese movie, but that means that it's a Scorsese movie, right? He's firing on all cylinders. The camera work, the different, the splicing in, the lifestyles of the rich and famous, and the TV stuff, the talking directly to the camera, the frenetic pace, the editing, the music choices, everything. He's just
the talking to the camera
cylinders.
is actually that is unusual for Scorsese.
I'm
he
thinking
does
of
voiceover.
I'm thinking of Goodfellas and the end of Goodfellas. But,
yeah.
I
was that was the one thing that I was surprised by how much talking to the camera happened. I
think that if you sort of accept that the movie is kind of a very a long confession
told by Jordan,
and that I think that it works better direct to camera as opposed to as a voiceover.
Yeah.
Because it gives more things for Leo to do. Because if he wasn't talking to the camera, what would he be doing?
Being a creep.
He would just be not talking. He would be just doing more cocaine.
Yeah.
Having sex with more hookers. But I think that when I say that David O. Russell deserves to be nominated because it was I'm sure that was a hard production. I think it's 10 times. I think The Wolf of Wall Street was 10 times harder.
Someone asked Spike Jonze in the same thing I referred to earlier about his day on set of The Wolf of Wall Street, and they were like, "What did you learn anything from seeing Scorsese? How does his process differ from yours?" And he said, "I could never do what Martin Scorsese does." He said he's in the middle of everything. There are a million things happening around him while he's trying to film a scene. And he said, my production is so quiet and so focused on exactly what's happening at the moment. Scorsese is thinking 80 steps ahead on what he's working on at the end of the production. And that's just the way he works. It's just frenetic. I can't imagine what kind of dedication it takes to make the films that he makes.
Right. And I mean, you watch The Wolf of Wall Street and you can see it. You're like, wow, it's like everything. It's like every little thing. You know, it's like, hey, we gotta film some stuff with a helicopter. It's like, okay, well, let's get a helicopter and let's film some stuff with a helicopter. It's like, well, we gotta do that now. And just, you know, wrangling such a big production. I think it was a long production, too. I think it took a long time to shoot.
The original cut of the film is 4 hours long. It had to have been a very long production.
Oh, man.
The only time Scorsese has won was for The Departed.
Which was an apology for not winning for Goodfellas.
Or maybe even Gangs of New York.
Or Gangs of New York. Oh, yeah! Damn, he didn't win for that either.
No.
What won that year? What was that year? Was that 2005?
I honestly don't know.
I'm sure whatever it is will make me angry, but it was like Gladiator.
And I'm happy that he won for The Departed because I think that, in my mind, The Departed is his best film since Goodfellas, which is going to be my favorite Scorsese movie forever.
The Academy is just crazy when it comes to the Best Picture. I'm looking at the Best Pictures from the 2000s, and I said Gladiator because I know that Gladiator won one year. It was in 2000, and that was the year that Traffic was nominated for Best Picture.
Traffic!
It beat Traffic.
Traffic is that's just one of the best movies made in the 2000s.
Lord of the Rings beat Lost in Translation.
Sofia Coppola's only decent movie.
Yeah. Here's 2004. The Aviator, Finding Neverland, Ray, Sideways, and the winner, $1 Million Baby.
I love Clint, but that's a strange pick.
Crash was the year that Capote, Brokeback Mountain, Good Night and Good Luck, and Munich came out.
I would have given it to any of the others.
So The Departed won in 2006. The other nominees were Babel, Letters from Iwo Jima. I don't even know why that got nominated. Little Miss Sunshine and the Queen. Obviously, The Departed was way better.
Hollywood was enamored with Clint Eastwood for the first part of the 2000s. It was like they thought that he could do no wrong. And his movies were good, but I don't know if they stood up with all the others.
Yeah, I don't know. So here, in more recent history, when we have like a dozen movies getting nominated, The King's Speech won in 2010. That year was the year of Black Swan, The Fighter, Inception, Winter's Bone, and The King's Speech was the one that won.
We had that. We covered that one, and I was definitely in the Inception crowd.
Yeah, Inception. I would have given it to either. That was the year The Social Network was nominated as well. I probably would have given it to Inception or Black Swan, but and this was also the first year the Academy did. Oh no, it wasn't. This was the second year that the Academy did something that I've been advocating for a long time, and that was letting an animated feature be nominated for Best Picture. And
yes.
Toy Story 3 was. The year before, Up was nominated.
Yes.
In 2011, it was The Artist. And that year was kind of a mixed year, but it was the year of The Tree of Life and Moneyball, which, I think were very, very strong movies. And last year, what happened last year is what could happen this year. Argo won. A good movie, but not
Best Picture.
Not Best Picture. That was the year of the movie that I couldn't think of, Beasts of the Southern Wild.
There we go.
Django Unchained. Zero Dark 30. There were other strong movies that could and or maybe should have won that year. So
would Zero Dark 30 have won if Hurt Locker didn't exist?
That's one of those Academy Award voter psychology things,
right?
I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe not. I mean, I think that she had won, within the past 10 years. I think there's almost an unspoken rule that like if you've won in the past like 5 or 10 years, you're just not allowed to win.
They just try to space them out for some reason,
so they can remain, relevant. But what it does is people lose confidence, I think. Not like everyday people, because everyday people don't care, but people like you or me, we're like, well, you keep picking bad things.
Because I think it kind of makes sense that if it comes down to an individual person's skills, you're only going to be at your best game at one period of your life.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't it make sense that you would put in your best performance like 2 or 3 years in a row and probably be deserving of that award 2 or 3 years in a row?
It's like saying back in the, mid 2000s that, sorry, Tiger Woods, you're not allowed to win another Masters because you won last year.
Yeah, I mean, at least that's objective, so you can't be like, oh, well, he wasn't the best because his score was the best. He did win. This is subjective, so you get this weird, like, well, he won last year.
Yeah, and there's one big thing, and I actually read an article, I think it might have been in EW recently, that is advocating that the Academy start making the voting process a little more public, so that people are held a little bit more accountable, because it's all secret,
right?
And they don't release the numbers.
Correct.
I think that they weren't saying that people should have to publicly vote, but maybe as a step in that direction, they should at least publish what the distribution of the vote was, which I would totally be in favor of. I want to know. I want to know what happened, because then
how
also
close were some of these races?
Yeah, because I bet what you would see in years like 2012 is that Beasts of the Southern Wild, Django Unchained, and Zero Dark 30 all have like very similar scores, and Argo is a little bit higher, and you could be like, yep, it just like zoomed past them
by
because there was this like compromise. It's almost like, can't we award 2 Best Pictures or something so that we don't get into situations like this?
Okay, we can't all win, Carter.
Everybody's a winner. Everybody's.
This isn't kindergarten.
This isn't The Incredibles. So what do you think about this year? What do you think is going to win?
What do I think will win?
What do you think will win?
I actually think that 12 Years a Slave is going to win.
I think you could be right.
I think if it doesn't win any other category, it might take Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of those films that the Academy really bites at, that they're like, yeah, we like having a message.
Yeah, it's political.
Right.
Yeah, like George Clooney had that speech that South Park references.
The smug? The
smug speech, what's her name was nominated for an Academy Award for Gone with the Wind, and blah, blah, blah. We've been moving the country forward. Yeah, I think you're right on that, but Dallas Buyers Club has some of that too.
Yeah.
With a major someone who is nominated. Although I think that they get to have their cake and eat it too by nominating Jared Leto. They don't have to.
Right.
People won't feel compelled to vote for it for Best Picture. Do people just get a single vote, or do they rank the movies?
I don't know.
I think it's a single vote. But it'd be interesting if they ranked them. I think that 12 Years a Slave is probably...
I think they rank them for the nomination.
Yeah, that's right.
And then it's a single vote for the award.
I think you're right, that 12 Years a Slave. So I think for sure American Hustle and Captain Phillips, and probably Philomena, but I didn't see it, so I'm kind of painting this with a broad brush. Those are sort of like not really on my list of movies that will really win.
No.
Just like they're like, yeah, you were good movies too. Which speaks to the whole they nominate too many movies thing. Like you could pare this list down. I think you're right. I would not be at all surprised that it was 12 Years a Slave.
I mean, I'm going to go see that immediately after this recording, so I will definitely have a better opinion of it then. But there's no way that I'm going to, in my mind, remember 2013 as anything but the Year of Gravity. That's my movie.
I think looking back 10 years from now, I will think that, although I really want, this is just my dark horse that I want to win all the categories. I want Nebraska to win, but it's not going to, and I've made my peace with that. I think that Gravity was the best picture of the year.
There's nothing else in this category, or even in the entire awards this year, that's like that movie.
Yeah, it was a technical achievement. It was an incredibly strong film. Everything about it was great. And it's a very different movie from movies that have been made before. And I think that we're going to see other directors responding to it over the next 5 or 6 years. Right?
For better or for worse.
Right. Either outright ripping things off, or, offering their interpretation on what's going on there. It's sort of like, what's a good example? Traffic. I think that the 2000s were really colored by Traffic.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But both in film and then especially in television.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of... I think you can probably draw a very strong line between Traffic in 2000 to Christopher Nolan doing the Batman movies. I think that there's like this grittiness and this seedy reality and the deconstruction of American morals and values and stuff like that.
And a lot of like anti-hero stuff.
Anti-heroes, yeah, exactly. Heroes that aren't, I think that the last time we saw that was maybe like in the 70s, like Chinatown or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that Gravity, speaking to a lot of themes of like connectedness and anxiety that's happening in America right now. Maybe like Winter's Bone.
In the
right?
world.
In the world. That's true. I think that Gravity accomplishes what, without being so explicit and gross, what Crash wanted to accomplish like 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
Like Crash was like, I'm a movie about people not being connected, and my name is Crash, and it's about people crashing into each other.
And Brendan Fraser.
Oh my god, it was so bad. And I think that Gravity's, much more subtle, much more deals with it with much more care, and that's why it should win. But I don't think it will. If it does, my faith in the Academy will have been restored.
I would love for it to win.
I'm Carter, and this podcast broke the internet.
I'm Sean, and this week, the American sitcom broke the internet.
So, Sean, what does sitcom mean?
What, literally? Like,
yeah.
Situational comedy.
Those been around for a while?
Practically as long as TV. No, before TV.
I think you're right, before TV.
I think we can argue that they existed in radio form.
On the radio. So you say sitcom, you go all the way back to the Honeymooners. Like the Honeymooners was like the first sitcom, not the first sitcom, but like if you're studying TV, you go all.
You got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere, and I think the Honeymooners is as good a place to start as any. And that you are the foundation, the bedrock of your media when Tina Fey makes fun of you on her live 30 Rock episode where they had a Honeymooners skit. So, why, like, before we actually get into like talking about the specific sitcoms, why do we keep watching these? Because so many of them are so bad.
I think there's an argument to be made that, as silly as it sounds, we already know what's going to happen. It's comfortable.
I think that's exactly right. There is a very clear structure to a sitcom, and you can totally follow along. It's
it's not like watching Homeland where you don't know what's going to happen from the beginning of the episode to the end. You probably already know what's going to happen, but that doesn't make it any less enjoyable.
Right, and it's not just that you know what's going to happen episode to episode, but that in some ways,
how everything ends.
Every episode is the same, but with it's sort of like doing Mad Libs. You just fill in like this week we're gonna talk. It's gonna be about, the first day of school for your kid or whatever, and then they, the writers think of common everyday things that everybody experiences, and then think of jokes about them, and then they plug them into their Mad Lib, and then they've got a TV show.
Right.
So it's also really cheap to do it.
Right.
Because, you know, like the I think the sitcom was the canonical, inexpensive TV show that anyone could do until we got reality TV.
And then, boy, things got really cheap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean...
And now we all hate America.
Now everything sucks. Between the rising pressure and competition of cable and other non-network, you know, media for content, and then the Writers Guild strike, it's like, well, now we've got reality TV. That's a thing now. Do you think that in 30 years, 40 years, your kid and my kid will be recording a podcast about reality TV? And they'll be like, you know, the canonical example is Survivor. You got to start somewhere, so it's Survivor.
Right.
And then just like, well, you know, there's like, and then they're talking about their favorite edgy new reality TV show that's breaking all the models of reality TV shows and redefining how reality
because
TV
it's recorded by like some 18-year-old in his parents' basement, and he does it, uploads it directly to the internet, and avoids the whole network structure.
Yeah. And then you can download it onto your Hollow TV.
Right. Without edges.
Without edges.
New Girl is a comedy on Fox, and it was one of those immediate success stories. Like it connected with a lot of people and did really well immediately. And I've been watching it since season 1. It is now mid-season 3. And the reason that this topic came about is because I was catching up the other day, and I tweeted something about like, man, New Girl is consistently like the funniest show that I watch. It's just like spot on every time. And the reason the episode I was watching that I realized how funny it was basically a bottle episode where characters are trapped someplace and they'll do cutaway things, but basically all of the story takes place in one area. And I think that's one of the challenges of sitcoms and other shows, that if you can survive a bottle episode just on the strength of your characters and the actors giving their performances, then you probably have a pretty strong show. That's what I think.
So what do you think is driving the viewership? What do you think is driving the success of New Girl? Because it seems like such an unusual show.
I don't know that I actually have an answer for that.
Or, so if you don't, you know, if we don't have like a way to answer that, then maybe another way to say it, to like think about it is, what makes you keep coming back?
I think that, like many other sitcoms, I think Friends is a great example. I find the characters relatable. Like there are these things that happen that some character will get himself in some situation, and maybe it's a very heightened version of a situation, but I'm still like, oh yeah, I've been there. Yeah, I've seen that. That has happened to me, or that's happened to my friend, or I know a guy who knows a guy that has totally happened to him.
Yeah, no. So like the relatability of characters and the relatability of storylines on sitcoms, that's a huge thing that drives them. So like there are sitcoms that go like well past their sell-by date, and you know it's really obvious. And you know you might have a friend who watches, like I'm thinking of like Frasier, where it was really really good for the first 4 or 5 seasons, and then went on for like 5 more. And the quality kind of nosedived quite a bit, and people still watched it. And if you ask people like, why are you still watching Frasier? It's really not that great anymore. They're like, I just feel attached to the characters. It's like I know those characters.
Is the highest rated sitcom in America still 2.5 Men? Because I think that's a pretty good example too.
I guess, yeah. My mom consistently watched it, and I don't think she really watches it anymore. But like, I would come home on vacations or whatever, and her DVR would be filled with old episodes of 2.5 Men. I'm like, Ma, this show sucks. Why do you? Because I watched it and I'm like, I don't find any of this funny. I don't like any of it. And she's like, I just like those characters and I want to see what happens to them. It's almost like you're, you know, part of your family or something. You know, it's like, oh well, you know, I might not like Uncle Joey, but you know, I want to find out what happens to him. I want to know what's going on with him. You know.
Basically, when I get to characters that I don't like, it's got to be on a drama for me to keep watching. If I'm watching a comedy and there are a bunch of characters that I don't like, I'm like, pass.
one of the things that is irritating me about, as I said, I watched the first 2 episodes of New Girl, and I think it's a little uneven. I think it's really funny, although I'll say I don't like one of the characters at all, and it is pushing me away from the show. Do you know what character I don't like? Can you guess?
No.
I don't like Schmidt at all.
Oh, but,
I don't think he's funny.
No.
I don't think he's funny.
But
I don't
you've only
like his
seen the
shtick.
first 2 episodes.
Exactly, but it's like I don't think he's funny. I don't like his shtick. I don't like anything about him. I don't think I don't like his character. I don't care what happens to him. They focus too much on him, and I'm just like, oh god. Every time he does anything, I'm just like, I hate you. I want to kill you.
I think his character rings true because eventually you get to learn how much of his personality is just complete insecurity and it just overcompensation for so much insecurity. And eventually, once you start seeing the little chinks in the armor and realizing that he's an actual human being, the character, that's when you're all of a sudden you're like, oh, I do like Schmidt. Yes, he's a complete dick and he doesn't know how to talk to people, but he actually has a heart of gold somewhere underneath all of that.
I buy that, but
you won't see that in the first 2 episodes.
But in the first 2 episodes,
I'm not arguing that.
Especially in the first episode, I'm just like, they could just replace him.
They give him a douchebag jar to put money in every time he says something that a douchebag would say.
Exactly, and it's like he's going out of his way to say it. And I'm just like, no, stop. All I want them to do is focus on Jess and Nick. Those are the only characters I like so far. They had Damon Wayans on, but then they did this hand wavy thing where I think that they probably couldn't get him back.
He was on 2 pilots, and they both got picked up.
Yeah, so they're like, oh, he's still a person, but here's another person. He also happens to be black. He also happens to live here, but he's different. And I'm like, well, okay, fine.
Well, at least they didn't just recast it.
Wouldn't it be better, though?
Well, no, because Damon Wayans comes back once his other show was canceled.
Oh, okay. Well,
they're both on
smart.
the show now.
That was smart.
Both
you know, one of the other things that is driving me a little crazy about this, this is so nitpicky, but I'm me. Their bathroom is not a bathroom that would exist in the world.
It's like a locker room.
It's like a locker room in an apartment. I'm like, there are lockers, and there is a shower that's from a locker room,
and a
urinal, and they have multiple sinks, independent sinks, and they even have the soap in a big metal box that you push the button and the soap comes out. And I'm like, that wouldn't exist.
Well, that's why it's a sitcom and you get to cheat a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I probably should have explained at the beginning exactly what the premise of the show is.
Do you want to do that now?
Elizabeth Meriwether is the woman who created the show, and she kind of based it on her own experience living with 3 men, which is a pretty unusual situation. One girl living with 3 similar aged men. And Zooey Deschanel plays the titular character, and even kind of bases her look on the real Elizabeth Meriwether, that's got to be really weird, coming to work and seeing yourself as a different person. And the 3 men are Nick, who Carter mentioned, he likes him. He's played by Jake Johnson, who everything I've seen him in, I think he's brilliant. He's so funny and seems like such a genuinely nice guy. Max Greenfield plays Schmidt. Lamorne Morris is the black guy who replaced the first black guy, played by Damon Wayans. And then Zoe's best friend on the show is a supermodel played by Hannah Simone. And she is ridiculously hot.
She looks like a model.
Yes, she does. She probably has spent some time modeling. So basically, each episode just focuses on various hijinks that happen in the loft. It seems almost torn out of Friends, but I think that there are substantial differences between New Girl and Friends that keep things feeling at least a little bit fresh.
How it's filmed.
Yes. Friends, the show that Carter will be sharing, is more of a traditional multi-camera setup and shot on video. New Girl is shot on film, and typically with just one camera, but sometimes they do cross camera coverage. And
they have to do coverage. There's no way they'd be able to film it.
Yes, you have. And one of the other reasons that they have to do coverage is they estimate that up to 20% of the show is improvised by the actors.
Just a sidebar for a second. I've been watching Paley conference videos of cast from various shows, particularly Parks and Rec, talking about their show.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that Chris Pratt talked a little bit about was that same thing, that Parks and Rec is single camera, quote unquote, but they have to do coverage because they improv a lot of stuff, and like they just realized, oh wow, these actors are doing all this stuff and we miss it, so like let's just set up 3 cameras. And that it's smart.
I think they learned that from The Office, because the same executive team is behind both shows.
You know who Jake Johnson reminds me of?
Who?
Do you know the actor David Krumholtz?
Yeah.
Well, I think they look like brothers.
I think the first time I saw Jake Johnson, I was really confused about why he wasn't David Krumholtz.
Right.
I was like, oh, that's that guy. But wait, he's too young. Oh, that's not that guy.
That's not that guy. Maybe they would have. Well, he would have been too old to be a New Girl, and I think he was still filming the show that he did on CBS, the crime show. He had a procedural with Judd Hirsch. Numbers. He was a math. Numbers. That I actually thought it was him too. I'm like, oh, it's that guy. Oh no, it's not that guy. It's this other guy named Jake Johnson.
And then I guess behind the scenes, it's worth mentioning that Jake Kasdan directs a number of the episodes. He did most of the episodes of Freaks and Geeks, which is a great example of how to do a dramedy. And then 2 of the executives on New Girl are 2 of the executives from 30 Rock, which is probably one of Carter and my favorite shows.
Like period, full stop, ever. My 2 favorite sitcoms of the decade of the 2000s are 30 Rock, and that's sort of for the latter half of that, and for the earlier half of that decade is Scrubs. And they're kind of like New Girl and How I Met Your Mother in some ways. Scrubs is a little more traditional than compared to 30 Rock.
Yes.
Although I think anything is more
30 Rock is madcap at best.
30 Rock is hard to explain like what's going on there. And I can't tell you how many times I see people using GIFs from 30 Rock, and then I just think, I bet you've never seen the show. Or
even there are expressions from the show that have probably broken into the mainstream that they don't know why.
Yeah, like what the what?
What the what?
I want blurg.
I want to go to there.
I want to go to there. I think what the what is probably the.
I think I said that earlier today.
Yeah. They coined a lot of weird phrases, and it's just such an unusual show. Like, there's this spectrum of. I think before we started recording, I think I said it's like the spectrum of like Mike and Molly to 30 Rock. Like the most, or I got Two and a Half Men is probably even a better example of like totally boilerplate. Like, yep, it's a sitcom, 3 cameras. There's a schlub, and there's a straight character, and there's some side characters, and it's whatever. And then along that spectrum, you get things that are a little more interesting and a little more maybe edgy, like Third Rock from the Sun. I think it's like, wow, it's very much a traditional sitcom, but it's also kind of different and weird and interesting. And then you get like to Scrubs, which is like, oh wow, that's very different. But then like out on the like far end is like 30 Rock and Community, and like these shows are, why are these shows?
It's really hard for shows like that for you to draw many lines to anything else that's already happened.
Yeah, exactly. They're in a lot of those shows are also, they have a bunch of writers, but they're also usually like one person's kind of insane idea that they somehow got money to do,
right? And
like controlled it with an iron fist, like some Stalin person.
And in the case of both shows, Community and 30 Rock, I think they get to like use that as self-referential material in the show.
Yeah,
the fact that it is that way.
The opening lines of the 4th season of 30 Rock are welcome to season 4, and it's and it turns out that it's, you know, all the main characters are at a restaurant called season 4, and then it's Alec Baldwin telling the actors and writers and producers of the show in 30
within
Rock,
the show,
the girly show TGS with Tracy Jordan. I always have to like remember
Morgan or Jordan,
telling them that they need to become more relatable
yeah,
and more like grounded, and how because of
which happened on Arrested Development as well.
That also happened. Oh, Arrested Development. That's another good example. Although they got canceled. See, those shows should, in all rights, lose their right. They have a great idea, and they do it well for a little while, and some people watch it, and then it makes sense that they would lose audience over time, and then the advertisers will be like, well, I don't want to. No one's watching. I
don't
want to
go down with this ship.
Right. It's like no one's watching your show. I'm gonna like put my money in, you know, whatever new thing that Seth MacFarlane is doing this week or whatever, and then your show fails. That's just like how it works. But for some reason, it didn't happen to 30 Rock. They just kept getting renewed over and over and over again. So I don't feel that about New Girl, though. I don't feel like it's so different.
No, it's not. I think that perhaps the biggest area that they stray from these kind of shows is there's often not a straight character in a scene. There are only zany characters. and sometimes I feel like that is why the show relies very heavily on choice editing, because they set up a scene probably on paper and then they just kind of let it happen. And in a show that you're going to write each scene, you want to end it with like you have a button or a tag or like something that ends the scene, and it's like big laugh and next scene. And New Girl won't do that. New Girl will just get like to the height of the scene where everything is its craziest, and then it'll go to commercial. Because there is no end to that scene. It just got completely out of hand, and everything was so strange. And it's like, oh, and next scene. And I'm fine with that. Like, I'm fine with ending in the middle of the craziness and just laughing, and now we're into the next scene, and we don't need to know how that scene resolved. It doesn't matter.
Right. There's a lot of freedom in the format. One thing that I'm thinking of specifically is I am very slowly attempting to half rewatch and half watch for the first time Lost. And
why would you do that to yourself?
We don't need to get into it. I'm watching maybe an episode every other week or so. I started this when I moved to DC. I'm at the 13th episode of the first season, but I'm doing it.
Have you watched it before?
I watched the first 2 seasons.
Okay.
I didn't watch the last.
I watched the first, and that was all I needed.
I watched the first season, and I got very frustrated with it, as everyone did, because of, you know. Well, I don't know. Maybe people
because
don't
of
know.
No payoff.
Because of no payoff, and also because it's almost like, you know, how like The Sopranos or Mad Men, you know, it's like they were off the air for like 2 years or something before they did a new season. They kind of did that, but in the middle of seasons with Lost, where it's like we have a new episode, and then we're going to show the past 3 episodes again, and then you'll have a new episode 4 weeks later.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? And they did that in the first and the second season. I think they stopped doing that later. But I watched the first season, got frustrated. I watched the second season. I think that was my senior year of high school. Yeah, and then I missed the finale because I was in Michigan and I didn't have a TV. And I had my mom tell me what happened. Literally. I'm like, what happened? Tell me. There was no internet either that I could get. It was like, what? That was before Wikipedia, too. It's like, I didn't know where to go. And she was like, oh, there's something, and they were on a boat, and people in, like, hazmat suits, and I'm like, what? And then the first episode of the 3rd season aired when I was in freshman year of college, and they showed it in, like, this big area, and lots of people went there, and I saw it, and I'm like, I'm done. And I checked out of Lost. So what is that now? 8 years later, I'm coming back to check it out. But anyway, that was a huge sidebar. My point was going to be, it's so hard, no matter how good the show is, to watch many of them at a time if they're 44 minutes long versus 22 minutes.
Yeah, that does hinder you, but
it doesn't sound like it should, but it totally does.
And actually, thank goodness that they're only 44 minutes. speaking of Mad Men, I was watching a Mad Men, and they mentioned how much commercial time was on an hour of TV in 1967, we'll say. 6 minutes in an hour.
So
that means shows were
54 minutes long.
54 minutes.
How did they make TV back in the 60s?
I don't know.
So we're going to veer in a different direction now toward a much more traditional sitcom. I actually have the viewer numbers for both of these shows up. I Wikipedia'd them while Sean was speaking.
Was I like so far off on New Girl?
Yeah, you're way off.
Damn it!
So the premiere of the first episode, the pilot, got 10.3 million viewers, which is huge.
Maybe that's where I pulled that number from.
That's huge. But their average viewership for the first season was around 8 million, and for the second season, it's around 6. And the third season is not over, but they actually had the exact same number of people watch the first episode of the third season as watched the second, around 5.5.
Okay.
So we're talking. The show averages, in the 6 millions. How I Met Your Mother, which is the show that I'm going to be talking about.
I've never heard you mention this show before on any of our recordings ever.
Ever? And you've never heard me say things to you about why don't you watch this show? I love this show. You don't get my in-jokes from How I Met Your Mother, and it makes me sad. It averages consistently. Now, this is why the show is still on. The first season average was 9.4 million. The 8th season average was 9. And it just averaged between high 8s and low 9 million viewers for every season for 9 years. That is incredible consistency for a show. And if I was CBS, I would be very sad if they were ending it. And they are, which is probably why they now have How I Met Your Father coming.
Yep, gotta do the spinoff.
It's not going to be the same characters, but it will likely take place in quote unquote in the same universe. So it will be a totally different group of people that don't have any relationship to our characters, but
for
they
now.
probably for now until they do guest spots. Is
it the same showrunners?
I think that some of the producers are going there and some of the writers, but I don't think that Carter Bays and Craig Thompson. Oh boy, if I get that wrong, I'm gonna feel really dumb.
Wait, one of the showrunners has the same name as you?
Mm-hmm. And Carter Bays is he modeled Ted Mosby off of himself.
Ah.
And every once in a while people tell me, it's like, yeah, your life is kind of a little Ted Mosby-ish. And I'm like, I hate you. And where Carter Bays and Ted Mosby are from? Ohio.
Nice.
Yeah, so I have a lot of relationship to the show. So anyway, it's had incredible consistency. And it was very happenstance-y how everything went down on how it very initially got produced, because it wasn't it's on CBS, and CBS is not 10 years ago they didn't take a lot of chances with shows, and I think How I Met Your Mother was like a kind of a risky choice, because Carter Bays and Craig Thompson just had this idea of basically doing hey, we want to do a show about how we moved to New York and life was hard in the mid-20s, or for people in their mid-20s. And we want to use all these actors that no one has ever heard of, except for Neil Patrick Harris and Allison Hannigan. And Allison Hannigan had literally just finished Buffy and moved right from Buffy to How I Met Your Mother. And CBS was like, okay, we'll do the pilot and we'll see how it goes. But Josh Radnor, never been in anything. Kobe Smulders, nothing. Jason Segel had been in Freaks and Geeks, but it's I don't think if you were yeah, he was in Freaks and Geeks, that show that got canceled?
No one knew that show.
And then it's
if you say that you knew that show when it was airing, you're a liar.
Yeah, and didn't he also do Undeclared?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's he was in these really offbeat, weird, quirky shows that got canceled because they're weird. Even Allison Hannigan and Neil Patrick Harris. Neil Patrick Harris was not.
He was famous when he was a kid.
He was famous for being a kid actor. I don't think he'd even done Harold and Kumar at that point. So it's like all these unknown actors in a sitcom that is 3 camera but has a tremendous amount of editing. If you watch an episode of How I Met Your Mother, a lot of it is in, one of the ways that they achieve, efficiencies in sitcoms is they build sets that you go to all the time. So in How I Met Your Mother, there's a bar, there's the apartment, then that's basically where everything happens, and then a street corner, and you just go to those and you do all of your scenes there. Exactly. It's, just not a coffee house. And they actually have an episode in the second season where they start out in a coffee house and they're like, yeah, this totally sucks.
This feels weird.
Why aren't we at a bar? Let's leave. You'll see all of those familiar places, but then they'll have a sequence like in the second episode where they do a whole setup where a kid is trapped in one of those claw machines, and they keep doing like cutting between the kid in the claw machine and Ted, like running to find Robin, the character that he was in love with at the time. He's been in love with a lot of people. And
isn't that how the show works?
That's how the show works.
Because each time you're like, is that the mother?
Yeah, so I think that for New Girl, one of the reasons why I watched it was because I literally didn't really know what it was about, other than it's like, it's Zooey Deschanel, and she's in a show. I think that it's more likely
I don't think
that
you're far off.
That's basically it. I think that more people probably know what How I Met Your Mother is about because A, it's been on for 10 years, and B, it's like really popular.
And C, it's kind of in the title.
Yeah. It's kind of in the title. So it's a show about this guy, Ted Mosby, who is in 2038 is telling his kids the story of how he met their mother, and he is voiced by Bob Saget.
For some reason, he's voiced by Bob Saget? Why?
And can you imagine while they're pitching this, they're like, oh, and it's actually being told to 2 kids on a couch 30 years in the future, and it's the person who's telling it is Bob Saget.
I don't understand that thing. Why does his voice change to Bob Saget's voice when he's older?
Bob Saget tweeted that to Josh Radnor, and Josh Radnor said, "We'll see." I'm a huge fan of How I Met Your Mother, and I have been for a really long time. I started watching it in its 3rd season, and I have, consistently really liked it because I think it is one of those kind of more standard sitcoms, but it does everything very, very well. So it's kind of like, who were we talking about last week? Sandra Bullock is an actress who, outside of Gravity, probably hasn't been in anything like really daring, really like, whoa, I can't believe she played a transgender character in, a movie with Matthew McConaughey or something, right?
Right.
But she always delivers really solid performances. You always enjoy what she what she brings, and she's just really solid. I think that How I Met Your Mother is very similar. That it's like, is it just sort of a sitcom, kind of like Friends? It's about a group of 20-somethings who become 30-somethings living in New York. Yep, it's that. But I think it's excellent, and it's if you wanted to make your own sitcom, it's probably a good reference to how you do certain things, how you set up recurring things, how you make references, throughout the show, right? So one of the things that How I Met Your Mother can do that New Girl can't do right now is stuff that relates back to its 9 years of being on television.
Yeah.
And the only way that you can do that is by being on television for 9 years. So if New Girl is on for 9 years, then they'll be able to start talking about things that happened years and years ago. They'll be able to, those characters can grow and change, and you can integrate that into the stories. The stories sometimes can become easier because the characters have been through so many things.
Because they have history.
Exactly. And then
you can also build a fake history, which New Girl has done, and Friends famously did by, like home movies that their parents shot in the 80s when they were all in high school.
Right.
And that gives you even more of a chronology to work with.
How I Met Your Mother does something similar. They actually take great liberties with going with moving through time. So they will frequently go back to high school, particularly to college, because the main characters all knew each other in college. They will zoom forward years and years, and they don't feel compelled to just stay in the current time. But one thing that I wanted to bring up particularly is this whole how characters change over time. And I think that this has happened to How I Met Your Mother in a big way, and this is something that just tends to happen with sitcoms and with shows that have been on for a long time. And I'm sending Sean a link to a TV Tropes article right now on something called Flanderization. So I asked Sean if he had heard of this term before we started recording, and you said no, right? But you then asked.
I correctly ascertained that it has to do with Flanders.
Yeah, with The Simpsons.
Flanders.
So, Flanderization is the tendency of shows, particularly ones that have gone on for a really long time, to exaggerate the character traits until they become the entire character. Sometimes
that's the thing that defines the character.
Right. So in the very first episodes of The Simpsons, Flanders was just a foil for Homer. Right. Homer was this schlub who cursed and drank and whatever, and they're like, well, we'll give him a neighbor, and he's just like a good guy, he's friendly, and he goes to church. And then in the 29th season,
oh my god, we're so old.
He, like, when you think of Flanders, it's just like he is just a religious zealot, right, who has all of his Flanders like characterization. Those traits get exaggerated to like an enormous degree. How I Met Your Mother experienced this as well, and I think to its detriment, particularly by the 5th season. So the one character who I think everybody knows and that you'll know is
Barney.
Patrick Harris's character, Barney. In the first season, in the first seasons, Barney's Barney. What are the things that we know about him?
He's a womanizer.
He's a womanizer. He likes suits.
I don't even watch the show.
Right?
Suit up.
You know that. Suit up. You know that about him. So it gets so extreme that by the 5th season, he has to pretend that he doesn't like suits to get this girl, and then she finds out when he eventually gets her to his apartment that he has suits,
right,
and she says, you have to choose between me and your suits. And there is literally a 3-minute long song and dance number called Nothing Suits Me Like a Suit, with all the characters.
What, they wanted to show off the Broadway chops of NPH?
He's quite the song and dance man. He looks good in a suit, and suits had so defined him that they had a whole episode about him and his suits. Same thing happened to a lot of the other characters, and then I think they figured out that they were going too far, and they pulled it back a little bit. But that's something that happens in shows that go on for a really long time, or can happen, is that characters get Flanderized, and they become the kind of basic character traits that the writers imbue in them when they start. And I don't know if you're seeing that in New Girl after just 3 seasons or not, but it's something that sometimes it's fun too, right?
I think that happened almost immediately with Zooey Deschanel's character Jess. And they realized it because there was a bit of a public Twitter, et cetera, backlash. And they were like, okay, sorry, we made her too dorky and too whatever. We'll rein it back in.
Yeah, she was asking out a guy in the 2nd episode, and there was dancing and stuff. And I was like, I find it adorable, but it is not realistic.
Yeah, it was to the point of absurdity. It didn't make any real sense in any sense of the real universe. Right. This would not happen.
All right. Well, do you have anything else on New Girl?
I love the show. I can there are weeks that that I'm like, that one was not as good. But I'd say consistently from a just pick up and watch it kind of viewing experience, I couldn't pick a better show to recommend to anyone. I love Community, but I would never be like, oh yeah, just turn on Community, watch one, because you would just be like, this is terrible. What is happening here? New Girl, you don't need to know what's going on. Just turn it on, and I'm sure that even if you don't know who any of the characters are, you're going to laugh because it's very funny and it's very well written.
I agree with that. I think that it is a modern Friends with fewer characters. It's easy to turn on and just watch it. There's no complicated storyline.
So before Carter and I stumbled upon this podcast that broke the internet, we'd been shooting around an idea of how to get started. And one of the ideas that I think we actually went pretty far with, except for the actual completion of it, was we were watching a bunch of fall premiere shows. We had TV comedy and TV drama. And I sampled everything that we had put into this bracket, which Carter will talk about in a second. And my favorite show out of that bracket actually went on to win Golden Globe for Best Comedy Series.
You like Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
I really like Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
I've seen a couple episodes. I think it's really good, but I haven't really invested myself into it.
It's very smart. It's very well done. And Andy Samberg is much better than I would have expected him to be.
I seeded them pretty low, too. So anyway.
So who else was in the bracket?
So if you know me, you know that I actually really am fascinated with using brackets for deciding things. Because I think that they're a very good way of getting people to getting to more optimal outcomes in voting.
Yeah.
For things like for subjective things.
Right. Because you can't just say like this show is better than this show. There has to be a certain amount of subjectivity. That's why it's art.
Right. And there are other. I work in politics and wherever we don't need to go there. I know a lot about voting and about different methods of voting and
biases.
And I know there are very simple ways of voting, like voting. It's two people, you pick one, whoever gets the most wins. That's a really bad way to do any kind of election, but that's the easiest way to do an election. And there are really, really, really complex ways that are Condorcet complete, where every person is in a mathematical way. Basically, you hold, for however many possible outcomes there are, you have every single one of them in a head-to-head in some way, so that at the end, whoever the winner is not just the overall winner, but they would win against anyone else.
Okay. Which
you don't get with a bracket.
Right.
But brackets are a nice sort of compromise way of trying to do that. So I came up with the bracket we were going to use, and Sean said we had comedies and we had dramas. So the comedies, in order that I seeded them based on how strong I thought that they would be, and I was obviously wrong about this.
Well, how could you know?
How could you know? So for comedies, we had The Crazy Ones, the show that I mentioned with Robin Williams, seated number 1. The Michael J. Fox Show, which I think got canceled.
Did it actually get canceled? I'll find out.
Maybe it just didn't get renewed. Brooklyn Nine-Nine on Fox, and Trophy Wife that I seated number 4. And I've actually watched several episodes of that, and I think that if I did this over again, I would have seated Brooklyn Nine-Nine first and Trophy Wife second.
I would agree. Michael J. Fox show I felt was pretty weak. I felt like it was late to the party. I thought it was really cashing in on a lot of the stuff that Modern Family has really already done. And Trophy Wife was surprising because it's a terrible title. And it was
idea is weird.
And the idea is weird, but it was much better in its execution than it should have been. But
it's really good.
Still, Brooklyn Nine-Nine just kind of came out of nowhere, and I really like that show. I will continue watching it.
Yeah. I don't know if Trophy Wife has gotten picked up for another season, but it should. It's really good. I like it a lot.
It's not just the strength of Bradley Whitford.
It's not. It's not at all. Actually, I was surprised how much that what's her name? She has a Swedish name.
Malin Ackerman.
Yeah.
I'm pronouncing it. I'm butchering it, but that's her name.
I was completely blown away by how strong her performance was in the first episode. It starts out she is playing drunk. The very first thing you see of her.
It starts out in the middle of the story.
Exactly, which is a great way to start. So those were the comedies. And I think I can't remember in my emails if I said this, but I feel this now, that I thought that the comedies were stronger than any of the dramas, and I believe that has that's very apparent now. So the drama category, the number one was Hostages with Dylan McDermott.
Yeah.
I watched the first episode. It was terrible. The Blacklist on NBC. I don't even remember what that's about anymore.
That's that James Spader show where he knows a bunch of stuff that no one else knows.
Yeah, that's right.
That is probably, out of this list, that's probably, that might be the most successful show. It is the one that is getting the most press coverage.
Sleepy Hollow on Fox, which
it's down to those two.
Popular. Yeah, that ended up being very popular. And then Dracula, which did get canceled?
I think so.
I think it got canceled. It ended up not being very good. And then I also had, as possibles, I had Betrayal on ABC. I had We Are Men, which was on CBS, which got huge crap for being like crazy sexist, misogynist. Lucky 7 on ABC. Don't remember what that's about.
Nope.
Sean Saves the World with Sean Hayes on NBC, which turned out to be kind of like strongish, but I think they got renewed. But and then Almost Human on Fox, which also is doing very well.
Yeah,
and
I watched. I was disappointed that Sleepy Hollow even existed, but it was just as silly as I expected it to be.
It's very silly.
It's a procedural with a guy who's dead, and for some reason won't take off his period clothes.
Right. Well, I don't know. And if you
the Blacklist was interesting, but I just was worried about the whole Lost thing, and wondered if there was ever going to be a payoff.
Right. And if you're wondering if aren't you guys missing a show that started this season? Yes, I intentionally didn't put S.H.I.E.L.D. in because we thought that we were going to do something separate with S.H.I.E.L.D.
And then it wasn't very good.
And I stopped watching it.
I have not. I was watching, and then I just gave up.
I watched the first episode, wasn't super impressed. I watched the second episode, I didn't like it, and then I was like,
After they hinted for like the 6th time that they're going to tell us what actually happened with Coulson, and still didn't tell us, I was like, I'll just watch the movies.
Exactly. If they get a second season and Kobe Smulders moves to it, maybe I will start watching again because I really like her. But if they don't, I don't care. It's not. No skin off my back.
Oh, Joss.
Joss. Well, there we go. So, if you're playing along at home, which one of these did you think was the best? Probably the ones that we said. If you're listening to us, right? Like, you probably agree with us.
You probably agree with us.
Although on our previous podcast, there were so many people who listened regularly, and every single week would write a comment or send an email or a tweet like, Carter is wrong about everything. And I'm like, whatever, man. I got a podcast.
My name is Sean, and this podcast broke the internet.
And I'm Carter, and this week's science fiction literature broke the internet.
I think we were going to approach this topic as a general conversation on books, because we both do a lot of reading. But when it came down to it, somehow, coincidentally, Carter and I both picked books that are of a similar ilk. Science fiction. Science fiction and written like at exactly the same time, or at least published at the same time, which probably speaks a lot to the amount of similarities in our tastes, which I think we already knew.
I think that's probably true. The year 1999 was a very important year. We had these books, we had The Matrix. It was the end of or the year before the end of a millennium, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Right in the middle of X-Files, lots of stuff was going on. And it was the end of the 90s, and the 90s were formative years for the both of us.
I was definitely reading science fiction at this time. These books I didn't read until a couple years later after they were recommended to me by someone, and I'll get to that. But I know at this time, and probably from the beginning of me realizing how much of a reader I was, and even now, the author that I've continually read, and the one who refers to me and the rest of us as constant readers, is Stephen King. Stephen King is really the reason that I read consistently. If I can't read anything else, I will read something by Stephen King. Also because he's written so goddamn much that I don't think I will ever read everything that he's written.
He writes, so do you know this? His practice is every day he writes, is it 40 pages?
Sounds
it's either
right.
20 or 40. Every day, no matter what, he writes 40 pages. Doesn't edit 40 pages, doesn't like revise and whatever. He generates 40 new pages of work every day, 7 days a week.
Yeah. And he's always working on multiple things too.
Exactly. Like write some here, write some there, write something that might be a short story, write a character study, and then just like every once in a while when he's got to pay the bills, he like grabs some pieces and puts it together and it becomes a 5,000 page book.
And that was even kind of covered because he writes about authors so much. He covered that kind of idea in a book called Bag of Bones, which has an author who just like squirrels away some books because he's afraid that one day, and it does happen, one day he has writer's block and it doesn't go away for like a decade. And he starts just pulling out the old books because he's like, well, I wrote it when I was still good. And he starts handing them in. And one day he runs out of old books.
That's full of tension and suspense. I want to find out what happens next.
One of the other things I love about reading on a daily basis is you find yourself going through things in your life that even if a book like Bag of Bones, which is a supernatural story about it's a realist, like an estate getting settled, even though that had nothing to do actually with what was going on in my life, I will forever associate it with the fact that I was going through jury duty and sitting in on a trial at the same time that I was reading this book. And there were just things going on that I was like, what a strange coincidence that these things lined up. Like something in the book would remind me of the trial, and then something in the trial would remind me of the book. And they were not that similar, but they are forever tied together in my memory.
Well, human beings are pattern matching machines who associate coincidences and whatever. But nevertheless.
I read in college a slew of science fiction books because where I went to school, Millersville University, my favorite professor, his name's Dr. Tim Miller, he's an English professor, he offered a seminar completely on works of science fiction. We went through the gamut of Jules Verne forward, Ray Bradbury, and one of the authors that we didn't have time to get to that he highly recommended when we left was a guy named Stephen Baxter. Stephen Baxter is an English hard sci-fi writer, and the books that he specifically recommended was a trilogy called the Manifold Trilogy. And when he sold it to me, which was not a hard sell, because this guy recommended so many good things to read that I read almost everything that was on the list. He said, it's a series about Fermi's paradox. Enrico Fermi was one of the guys who unfortunately worked on the Manhattan Project, but he was also a great scientist and a great mind. And the Fermi paradox is basically the idea that the universe is so old that it doesn't make sense that we have not observed intelligent life yet.
Mm-hmm.
Where is everybody? Why haven't we seen them? The Manifold Trilogy is 3 books that are 3 possible solutions to the paradox. And the most interesting thing about them, they're titled Time, Space, and Origin, is they all revolve around the same characters in a multiverse. So it doesn't actually matter which order you read which of the books in, because they don't have any real relation to each other. They are just 3 different answers to the same question. So they all center around this guy named Reed Malenfant, who is a guy who's been ousted by NASA mostly just because he's a kind of an asshole, but what genius is not. And his focus on getting us off of the planet, because like a lot of scientists and environmentalists, he sees an end in sight to us inhabiting this planet. He's like, we have to do something to make sure that we survive past our own destruction of Earth. So he wants to get off the planet, harvest some asteroids, start to like what he calls bootstrap our way into our own solar system and then eventually the galaxy beyond. And as he goes about it, he finds in each of the 3 books ways that there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. In time, the answer is basically, and I'm not really going to spoil anything, but I'll just give you the basis of the answers. In time, the answer is, of course, that we are not in the right time period. And he finds basically a wormhole of some kind to a different point in the time of the universe where the rest of the civilizations are waiting. In space, we are not in the right place. And again, he finds wormholes to a different place in the universe that he is then able to understand where the rest of these civilizations are. And in Origin, the answer is that our lack of contact was from a point in time when all of the races in the universe originated on Earth and then got thrown off into all kinds of different places. And that one, he ropes in a lot of ideas that are almost biblical in nature, with the like tribes of Israel and the way that they got split up. And he kind of just uses that as an example for what could have happened if this were a possibility and wormholes were real.
So you want to talk about coincidences? Not only am I listening to right now, I walk to work and I listen to a podcast, Hardcore History, and I'm listening. It's in like my 6th hour of this podcast about World War I, and literally 20 minutes ago, Enrico Fermi, his argument was being made by the podcast host.
Okay.
About how part of a corollary or conjecture based on the Fermi paradox is that the reason why there aren't other things in the universe is that everybody reaches a point technologically where they are able to destroy themselves, and then everybody destroys themselves. There's also a statistical argument that is going to happen at a specific point in human history. You know what that argument is called?
No.
The Carter catastrophe.
Oh. Oh, I do know that because that's mentioned in one of these books.
How about that?
That's the thing that he's trying to avoid.
We were meant to record this podcast.
Yeah, so the thing that I really like about these books is even though they are hard science fiction, and the difference between hard and soft is that I would say that Star Trek is soft sci-fi because it doesn't really deal with all of the problems of like, what is a photon torpedo, and like how do you travel faster than the speed of light, and replicators,
the most ludicrous thing ever.
Right,
that you can just replicate
no
things.
Explanation necessary because you don't need one.
Defying the laws of thermodynamics.
Right. Stephen Baxter has a background. I would say a good example of the type of literature that he is writing is the same kind of stuff that Arthur C. Clarke would write. It's very rooted in real things that people have already done, scientists have already studied, things that are not that out of the realm of possibility. The wormhole is the one thing that he plugged into this series that he explains in his own way, but it's kind of like, well, that almost sounds like magic, right? Wormholes. So it's hard sci-fi, but it's very easy to read. It's very character driven. It's not just a bunch of incomprehensible whatever. And getting to read the 3 different books, and I think if you read them in the order that they were published, it makes the most sense. You get a lot of rewards of seeing a lot of different angles on what is basically a philosophical question. Like, are we alone? It's a lot of different answers to a problem that I don't know if we're ever going to know the answer to.
That's true. That's what makes it a great question. Fermi's question was awesome. It boils down to, where is everybody?
Right.
Where is everybody? Where is everybody in the universe besides us?
There should be life everywhere. Why can't we find it?
Yeah, it seems like statistically we should have been able to detect some signs of like other life. So where is all of that other life?
I think that the Arthur C. Clarke answer to that question was the Rendezvous with Rama series, where basically we're alone, and then one day this giant arc basically comes flying through our solar system, and we don't know that it's an arc until we send out some astronauts to get on it, and then they ride it right on out of the solar system to eventually find a bunch of other civilizations that have also found these little arcs wandering around, and they go to a central hub of arcs and meet all of the other beings that are in the universe.
Right. I've repeatedly tried to record a video or a vlog or something about the brain in a vat philosophical argument, and it goes on for like 30 minutes, and I'm like, I can't do this. But another possible answer to where is everybody is there's only you. There are other people, but you're just in some sort of simulation, and that's why you're not seeing anybody else, because there's just not by intent. There's nobody else for you to see except for everything that's in the simulation. Like in the Matrix,
Smoker in simulation.
Right. It if there were astronomers living in the city of the Matrix, they would probably be just as confused. Like, why isn't there alien life in the universe? Why aren't we detecting any signs of it? And it's like, wasn't programmed, which is troubling to think of in and of itself.
Right. Which is why we don't spend that much time thinking about that.
Exactly. Don't worry, my video was an actual logical proof that you can like run through in your head of how you know that you're not a brain in a vat. It's logically impossible for you to believe that.
Does it distill down to I think therefore I am?
It does not.
Okay.
Because you can be
because someone's already written that.
Because you can be a thinking thing, and the thinking thing could still be in a vat. But you can't believe that you're in a vat. You could still like be in a vat, but there's no reasonable in no way can you reasonably hold that belief. So you can at least be sure that if you're starting to believe that, you can be like, no, it's not possible to believe that. Out of my head thought.
I look forward to that someday vlog.
It's never going to happen. I'll take the 10 times I've recorded it, edit it down to 45 minutes, and then it'll still be people will be like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, dude. Like, no, you just have to follow the symbols of this logical argument, and no, why aren't you paying attention to me? Yeah, that's why you need someone like Stephen Baxter to make the argument for you, right?
Right.
Because like you have characters and you can like fall into the situation, and I mean I imagine that those books aren't like going through all of the contortions of making a philosophical argument. It's just like a fun story,
right? And then you stumble upon the argument yourself, as you think about it. I read my books in college, and I understand that you hit these in your adolescence.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So both of these, so the first of the Manifold trilogy and my book, Cryptonomicon, were both published in 1999. And why I picked this, so this podcast coincidentally has turned into a podcast about coincidence. It was totally coincidental that I picked this book up. And yet it actually has had like this kind of crazy influence on my life that I in some ways only just realized a few weeks ago when we decided to do this project. So in the 90s, I was quite a reader, and I had sort of graduated, in the late 90s, 1998, 99, 2000. I kind of graduated into just reading whatever I want. And every few weeks or a month or so, my mom and I would go to a bookstore. This was back when bookstores still existed.
What's that?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. It's like the iTunes store, but like everything is real, and there's a limited number of things, and it all costed more. I would go to a bookstore, and I was allowed to get a book, and it could be any book I wanted. And it just, as long as it wasn't like crazy, unreasonably expensive, like $100 book. It's like, yeah, get whatever book you want. And books back then probably ranged, I wouldn't buy any hardcover books, so they would range between like $7 and $15. And I read really quickly, so and I knew I wouldn't be able to go back for another month. So my strategy was frequently, I need to buy the most interesting looking book that's the longest, because I want to get the most out of it. I don't want to like buy a 200-page book, read it, enjoy it or not enjoy it, and then have to wait another month before I can get another book. I'd rather like work, even if it's a book that I'm not totally satisfied with, I would rather it be like really long. One of my this was back in 1999. You didn't have the internet in your pocket. I didn't, like the internet itself was not like, I think Google had been around for 3 years at that point. There still wasn't a really this huge place for you to go to, and just like there was no Wikipedia. There was no place for you to go to just like find out everything that you're interested in. You did have to do more work back then to figure that stuff out. And I don't know how we lived. I don't know. It was crazy back then. I knew I liked science fiction. And so I would go to the science fiction section and I would look for the most interesting covers, and I would read the back. If the back was interesting, I would read the first couple pages. If that was interesting, I would hold it and I would just keep going. And I would spend probably hours in the bookstore, just like grabbing more books and then reading more and more into them and saying, no, I'm going to put that one back, until finally I decided, okay, this is the book I'm going to get. This one was pretty easy because it was this really, really, really thick book. And it was called Cryptonomicon, which sounded really cool. And the cover, it's like black with some runes on it, but it also has like some sci-fi looking stuff. And I was like, this seems right up my alley. So
how old were you at the time?
I was between 12 and 13 years old.
I was 13 when I read The Stand, and I did it for the same reason that you described. I wanted a giant book that I could read forever.
Yeah. Cryptonomicon is by Neil Stevenson. He's pretty famous in kind of the geek sci-fi culture. He's written a lot of cyberpunk books, Snow Crash, The Diamond Age. And when I thought back to a book to do, I kind of looked through all my books and I saw, oh, there's Cryptonomicon. I really like that book. And then the thing that I remembered was the story. And the story is really interesting. It actually has some things that are really pertinent for today's moment, which was really surprising now that when I thought back to it. So the structure of the book is, it takes place in two different time periods. It takes place during World War II, and in a sort of unknown mid to late 90s modern day. It's sort of like, it was supposed to be the present, but in 1999. Okay. But it's like kind of squishy enough that it could have been like, in the early 90s, maybe even in the early 2000s. And it follows three characters, two of whom are related. So in the World War II era, there's Lawrence Waterhouse, who is a mathematician and eventually becomes a cryptographer, and Bobby Shafto, who is a Marine who eventually starts escorting him around the world. And then in the modern age, it's Randy Waterhouse, who is Lawrence's grandson. And then there are obviously side characters and whatever. But the core idea of this book is one of the other main characters is Alan Turing, the famous British. That's a real person. Real person. He's a character in Cryptonomicon. He famously helped the what would become the GCHQ, the modern day NSA of the UK. He helped them break the German Enigma code at the Bletchley Park facility, which is in and of itself a really interesting history. Yeah. How they broke that code. Fascinating. There's and how they kept it secret. So the historical part of this book is what Turing never thought about that. All he thought about was the math and how you break the code. Lawrence Waterhouse is a historical amalgamation of people who discovered the idea that if the Japanese and the Germans figured out through our tactical victories that we had broken their codes, it would ensure long-term strategic failure, because they would then change their codes. So what Waterhouse and Shafto do in the World War II part of this book is they go all the way around the world advising on like how to lose and win certain battles with the knowledge that we have from broken codes, to ensure that the Germans and the Japanese don't figure out that we broke them. Yeah, that became like the most important part of the strategy. And what it did for those characters is it put them back in Manila, where, and I'm going to spoil the end of the book, but it's sort of, the book is kind of Hofstadterian, like it's recursive in some ways. Like, you don't find out some of these things until the very end, but you know so much about it already that it's almost immaterial that you find out this specific thing. They find what amounts to like 8,000 tons of gold in Manila. Yes. That's the real thing.
The Nazi gold.
Yes, they find the Nazi gold in Manila, and Lawrence leaves notes about it that his grandson Randy discovers. And what Randy does in the modern day, and it's kind of telling these two stories in parallel, is he and his friends decide to develop an anonymous internet banking system with an electronic currency.
Oh, so this is the story of Bitcoin.
Yeah, backed by that gold that he now knows is in Manila. They're going to back their currency on Nazi gold. and it's all about like how they're keeping secret what they're doing and how they're going to structure a system that allows for people to be anonymous but still trade this thing that's in value, and the way that they realize that they have to do it, the big spoiler of the book, which I think is just awesome, is they have to make sure that the gold is immovable. So it's in like coin and bullion and brick form. So they have to make sure that they basically explode it so that it becomes one giant 8,000-ton solid mass of gold that they control that is literally impossible to move. The actual reason why they're doing this is the big spoiler and kind of like another heart of the book, and I'll keep that a secret. They are noble warriors, and they're doing this they have an ulterior reason why.
Okay.
So, I always loved the story. It's a very interesting, complex story.
Do you feel like at that age you really got the whole concept?
Yeah, I think I did. I've reread it subsequently, probably when I was 15 or 16. But it was almost immaterial, the story itself. And the reason why is what it made me into as a young person. I ended up getting
a Nazi.
I ended up, Sean, I've never told you this, but I have 8,000 tons of Nazi gold. If we want to start like doing some projects, just know.
I wish you would have told me that earlier.
Well, I don't like talking about money.
You like burying the lead.
Yeah, exactly. This book came into my life at a point when I was really getting into computers, and a whole strain of this book is all about cryptography and like RSA, internet security, all sorts of. There's a whole. For some reason, they couldn't use the word Linux, so it's called Phoenix in this book. But there's this whole undercurrent about the Linux operating system and open source software. And I didn't remember until I started rereading this now some of the eerie, specifically detailed things about this book that I messed around with as a 12 and 13-year-old that I'm doing now. So actually on pages, like I literally wrote this down, between pages 53 and 55, there is a whole section on random number generation and entropy, which as a kid, I didn't fully understand what was happening. I just wrapped a project at my work, a 2-week project, on the same types of random number generation and entropy problems that this book talked about, that I messed around with. The Linux commands, there's a Perl script in here that's written in the book. I just wrapped a 2-week project that is exactly on this that I'm presenting on Tuesday. And when I read this book, not remembering all these things that I did, I literally almost dropped the book on the ground. Like how crazy detailed the stuff in this book is related to the stuff I'm doing right now.
You're right. This did end up being completely about coincidence.
And I wanted to close with a quotation from Steve Jobs about coincidence. It's from his 2005 Stanford graduation keynote address. And it's about him talking about when he dropped out of Reed College and was able to take courses that he was interested in, like calligraphy, that he never would have taken if he was like pursuing his like computer science degree that he had and the courses that he had to take.
If I had never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have them. If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on that calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do. Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever, because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference.
Yeah. So I would have never known reading Cryptonomicon as a 12-year-old. Like, if someone's like, oh, do you think that, you're going to end up doing a project on random numbers and entropy, like, literally 14 years later, for this job in this field that's wholly unrelated, I would have been like, are you out of your mind? This is just like a hobby. It's an interesting book. I'm going to be a lawyer. And then I'm like, I'm going to be a political scientist. I'm going to be a philosopher. I'm going to be a whatever.
Fireman.
Exactly. And then it just so happens, I mean, some of the coincidences aren't coincidences, right? Like, I became interested in those things because of the book, and it led me down paths that put me in the direction that I was headed in.
Right.
But some of the coincidences are just so eerily specific that you can't help but, like, take some pause and think about the nature of the universe.
This podcast Broke the Internet is a production of 5 Things.
If you have comments or feedback, you can find us on Twitter @PodcastBroke or use the hashtag PodcastBroke.